So, Gareth, are you ready to start recording?
Yes, we're recording, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, agenda item 1 then. Well, firstly, can I just welcome everyone to the meeting? And agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any, Gareth?
Just Mr. Gapper, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we've got minutes of 2 meetings to be approved. The one held on the 8th of July and then the special meeting on the 22nd of July. Would somebody like to propose the minutes of the 8th of July?
I propose.
Thank you, Neil. Seconded? Well, if no one else is going to, I'll second them.
There, Andrew will second it, Gordon, if you need it. Well
okay, thank you. So, everyone happy that those are a true record?
Very happy.
Okay, moving on then to the special meeting held on the 22nd of July. Again, would somebody wish to, would like to...
Move the minute.
Thank you.
Second them if necessary, yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay then, are there any declarations, agenda item 3, are there any declarations of interest? No, okay. Moving on then to agenda item 4, the Big Fresh Catering Company. And I'm sure we're all just concerned that we can't actually be somewhere with the Big Fresh Catering Company and sample their wares, but we'll have to imagine how good it is. So is that you, Carol, to take us through that?
Trevor's going to take us through this.
Trevor, you're just going to be there to lend support, are you?
Yes. Any questions?
Okay, that Trevor can't answer. Okay, Trevor, over to you.
Cheers. Yeah, in another lifetime, I would have loved to have us all around a table with some of our wares, but unfortunately that's not the case. So what I'm going to do today is, as part of our governor structure with the Big Fresh, I'm going to give you folks an update on the progress that we've had, I guess, over the last 6 years, really, but more recently over the last year since we've spun out as a trading company. So I've got some slides there. Can you all see that? Yeah, there's a nod.
Yes, yeah,
So,
no problem.
Perfect. So as a bit of background, and hopefully you folks will be familiar with a lot of this, the story starts in 2015 with reshaping services in the council and tranche 1. And the catering service was set a savings target of 350k. In 2016, that target was achieved, but in order to make it sustainable and go forward, we were looking at different operating models for how our catering service might look like. And we looked at a number of different options. There's some legislation in place in terms of what local authorities are required to provide, which is as simple as a glass of water and a sandwich. That's not good enough for us. Good enough doesn't live in our vocabulary in education. There are other options which we're looking at working with external partners, but of course those can be expensive and might levy some additional charges onto our schools. So what we wanted to do was take control of the situation a little bit and do something different, something that hasn't been done before in the Vale. This model specifically certainly hasn't been done elsewhere, which was to set up our own local authority trading company, which has a social enterprise ethos, basically, which says all of the profits we make go right back into the schools that we serve, full stop. So that agreement in principle was done in 2017. In 2018, we did a lot of work around getting the runway ready for launch. So there was lots of work around defining our culture, doing some training with our staff around commercialization, and looking at what we can do to bring in additional income. So one of the key benefits with a local authority trading company is that we are able to sell commercially to the private sector and make some profit. And of course, all that profit goes back into schools. But that's a different kettle of fish for us. So there was lots of learning around that. In 2019, then, a final report came to Scrutiny and went to Cabinet, and there was the final agreement to spin out the Big Fresh Catering Company. We officially started trading on the 1st of January 2020. And that's when things get interesting, but I will come on to that in a minute. On the right-hand side, you can see a little graphic there. It's one that we've used over the past few years, and it just shows, it conceptualizes the work that we've done, I guess, going from concept and research and putting things down on paper, which is the easy bit. And then there's dangling above the valley of death, that bridge where we look at commercialization and how we're actually going to operationalize stuff. And then looking at a period of growth, and that's where we are today. So there's three strands to the businesses that we do. On the left-hand side, the biggest picture is our schools. That is in our DNA. That is the reason why we exist. That is always going to be our first priority. Top right-hand corner is our retail side of things. So this is a picture of the cafe at the Peer Pavilion, which I'll come on to in a little bit. And then that's our lovely Airstream, which sadly has been mothballed over the pandemic, but it represents our mobile food service. So the Big Fresh Catering Company is governed by a board of directors. These are your directors. So Carol Tiley, obviously, who's with us today. She's our fearless leader. She's our managing director. We have two head teachers who are on the board. They're elected by the head teacher steering committee in the Vale. So we have Julie Thompson representing the primary sector and Lee Humphreys, who's with us tonight, representing the secondary sector. Councillor John Thomas, who represents the members on the board. Myself as the Vale officer. Vicky Davidson as our company secretary. Vicky is a rock star in the legal world and makes sure that we do everything properly, which is great. And then James Summerin, he's had success as a Michelin-starred chef, and he is our industry expert on the board, helping us with menus and some of the engagement that we do with schools. In terms of governance, you folks would have seen this in previous reports, but in a nutshell, the way that the company works, it's run independently and it has its board of directors, but it is owned by the council. The council is a single shareholder. Our board of directors reports into this committee, which is what I'm doing today to provide an update. And ultimately, the council has control over who sits on that board of directors and how that process is managed. On the Big Fresh side, under the MD, we've got the school side of things with our catering services and the commercial side of things. And then there's a small breakdown on the right-hand side, just talking about those three different sides of responsibility. So between schools, external trade, and the council. How do we do the things we're meant to do, and how do we know we're doing them properly? So the first part of that is a business plan. We spent quite a while putting together a comprehensive business plan, and you folks would have seen that. It went to cabinet and it also went through to scrutiny prior to the spin out of Big Fresh. We are following that to the as best we can. I suppose the good news with that is there have been some new opportunities, which means some of the stuff we've had in our business plan for year 3 and 4 of operation we're actually doing in year 1 and 2, which is great. The middle bit is some of those checks and balances. So I've put in there internal audit versus external audit, but why do either when you can do both? And that's what we do. So we get audited twice. We get audited by the council's internal audit service, and we also have an external auditor who comes in and checks our books, which they've done and which has come back very positive. And then on the other side of things, there's a learning curve with things like corporation tax, for example, which are new skills for us in local authority. Obviously, it's a different process. So we have an external accountancy company which advises us and does our tax returns and makes sure that every penny and dime is where it needs to be. One of the biggest things for us was defining our culture. Our culture is our success, and everyone loves a Venn diagram. So there you go. There's one for you. And there's some key principles there around safety and trust, and you know that references the fact that at the time we had 170 staff who worked in the catering service. Many of them worked in the local authority for many, many years. And here we are walking into a room telling them their contracts were going to change and they're going to be part of an experiment to be spun out. We took them on the journey with us, and trust and earning that trust was a big part of it. Belonging, obviously, there's a risk of feeling isolated if you're creating a new entity. So making sure we had some common themes, some shared understanding, and some core principles that folks could relate back to was important. And then purpose. again, we exist for our schools. We know the challenges our schools have. We know them acutely well because you've heard us come to this meeting and the same folks talk about budgets and all of that kind of thing. So we have an opportunity to do some good. The middle bit is about happiness. You have to have a sense of humor when doing these sorts of things, and that's been a key tenet to get us through some of the hard times, and there have been some hard times. A couple of pictures here. Again, this just looks at some of the engagement stuff. We've got our team over at Pencoitra, our kitchen staff. On the right-hand side, that's from, I should caveat everything and say a lot of these pictures were from the before time when we were allowed to hang out with other folks. So this is a picture of our directorate management team at the council and all of our head teachers. And I am very grateful because we do have an excellent relationship with our heads in the Vale. We always have a really good constructive relationship, and they've been on board with us throughout the last 6 years, so that's been great. And then at the bottom there, that's some of our team in the background who've been doing the work. So there's Carol and Simon, Annette, who is looking after our finances, Becky Quinn in the business support team, and Nicola Monkton, who you know from our education finance team. These are some pictures of some of the engagement stuff. So some of that culture I talked about. I don't think we'll ever see a picture like the top left in our lifetimes again, but that was a great day when we had decided on a logo and we introduced the uniforms to the staff for the very first time. And we did some work with them, and we had a great day testing out different things, and that was from the fashion show we had. Top right hand side, this was when we first got our Airstream, and we were testing out our what we were able to make with it. So we were down at Court Road with our neighbourhood and transport services colleagues feeding them poutine, which is an excellent Canadian delicacy, I should say. And we had lots of fun there. Bottom right hand side, this is a day we spent identifying our own signature blend for coffee. So as part of the business plan, we were going to have our own coffee shop and sell our own coffee. It needed to have a unique flavor. And then on the left hand side, this was trying our new grazing style buffets, and there's Paula and Simon there introducing that. It would be remiss of me if I didn't bring up the elephant in the room, which is COVID. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about COVID because you've heard a lot of this before in previous meetings. And there's lots of more positive stuff that we can be focusing on. And that's this type of stuff here. So throughout the COVID period, the company had to go dormant. So the 1st of January, we spun out. The 23rd of March, we shut down effectively from the work we were planning on doing. And we went into emergency mode. And part of that emergency mode was within 48 hours coming up with a new voucher system to support those eligible for free school meals across the Vale. It was also in support of our hubs. So all of our teachers and staff were out there in our hubs 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, as were our kitchen staff who were on a 3-week rota out there feeding those kids and those staff 3 meals a day. We've done some stuff around election support. So all of those staff who were helping with local elections, we had the privilege of going in and feeding them. Food delivery for those vulnerable kids during lockdown, for example. So we were alongside with a lot of the schools who were doing similar pieces of work. The Penarth Peer Pavilion is a great example. You heard me talk about that in the last Scrutiny meeting. You know, you would never choose the middle of a pandemic to launch something like that, but we did. And a key part of that success is Big Fresh as the anchor tenant in that building, who were able to help us manage a lot of that process. And then the online business, which is the grazing platters, and how do we continue to do some stuff and innovate in a space where we can't see each other and spend time together. This is a couple of pictures here on the left-hand side. This is the catering team during the first lockdown. All of those posters on the wall, we're trying to figure out the rotas for our staff across all of the different sites, working with our suppliers to get there. The picture on the right-hand side, this was folks from the catering service. We've got Dave there, we've got Nicole, we've got Tina, we've got Jane from 21st Century Schools. We were there stuffing envelopes with voucher codes and making sure that families could get them in the early days. Again, as part of our culture, developing supporting staff, this has been a big thing. So again, with these new innovations we've been able to offer some common opportunities for staff. We've done things around commercialization training. So Again, this is a different way of thinking for a lot of these staff. We've leveraged a lot of experience, so we have some really good examples of best practice with some of our staff. So it's been working with schools to leverage those skills, working with the cafe to leverage those skills, whether it's freshly based products or different things that we can offer. And then staff well-being throughout the pandemic, again, was a key one. So as a local authority trading company, separate from the council, we were able to use the furlough scheme when our staff weren't in kitchens as part of that rotation. We topped up the 80% furlough to make sure that our staff were able to receive their full pay, and we covered off their pensions as well. So we're looking after them because they trusted us to do so. We made arrangements for staff with families and caring duties, and we've introduced some stuff like loyalty cards and free parking at our head office down at Berry Island, which I'll show you in a sec. I have to apologize because I have to put this picture in all of my presentations because I'm a Canadian, and when you're born, they put it on your birth certificate. You have to pay tribute to Wayne Gretzky. He's the great one in hockey, but he has a really important quote that resonates with us and is part of the fundamentals of how we've approached this program, which is: the day that I stop learning is the day that I stop growing. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And it would have been easy to settle on outsourcing stuff for catering. It would have been easy to settle and offer something that wasn't the best. And as I said earlier, good enough isn't in our vocabulary. So where there are opportunities to do something great, we tried it. And sometimes we failed. And when we failed, we learned and we did better next time. The outcome of that is some of the stuff that you see on your screen. So top left-hand corner, this is our grazing platter business. So in, I think it was June or July in 2020, we set up a Facebook web store and we started to promote grazing platters with some of our staff, and it went viral. And we're up to thousands of page views a day, and we've done thousands of pounds worth of orders and deliveries for those grazing platters, which has been great. The Peer Pavilion, obviously, the council took back the running of the Peer Pavilion, and there was a desire to get that up and running and return to the people of Penarth and the wider Vale as soon as possible. And a big way to do that was to get Big Fresh in there to run the cafe. That cafe opened on the 26th of March and has been running ever since. And I'll mention some of the successes we've had there previously. Things like theme days, Halloween, Christmas, we've been taking advantage of those. We've been running events. The picture there is from the cafe and some of the specials that we had for LGBTQ month. And then on the right hand side, we're working with the cinema provision at the pavilion. We're looking at some experience offers, and this was from a paella night that we trialed, which went really, really well. For those folks who haven't seen it, this is the cafe at the Penarth Pavilion. It's been refurbished in the top left-hand corner. The top right-hand corner, this is the bar that's just opened. This services the events that run at the pier. We do it in conjunction with the cinema, which is great. Bottom left-hand side, one of the key promises the council made and Big Fresh was able to support was supporting weddings and bookings that were in the pavilion before things went south. And this is us living up to that promise. And there's folks from all across the council there in registry, neighbourhood and transport services, library services, plus Big Fresh, who working days, evenings and weekends to make sure that these folks had their special day. So I think that's a credit to their efforts. And then on the right hand side, this is the head office of the Big Fresh Catering Company. You might recognize it. It's the former Tourist Information Centre down at Berry Island. So we pay a commercial rent as a company. That rent goes back to the council as we pay a commercial rent at Penarth Pier Pavilion based on the amount of turnover we do there, which helps support the running of those spaces. In terms of our commercial successes there, this is a snapshot from the 26th of March up until the end of August. You can see there we've done over £100,000 worth of turnover in the cafe primarily, and with some of our delivery services. There's 17 returns on there. I should say most of those were mine when I was fiddling with the till system. But the important part there is the graph, and you can see the trend from March all the way up, and it's in one direction of travel, and it's been steady. So that business is growing, and that business is going really well. And so what? So what is the benefit of doing all of this commercial stuff? I thought we were here about schools. Absolutely. So let's talk about that briefly. Some of the added value that we've done, not just for schools, but for the community, we've added 20 new jobs to the market since September 2019. Creating new jobs from scratch, especially across the pandemic, is a big deal to us, so we're quite proud of that. We've got a number of new menus reflecting changes in legislations. This is Natasha's law, so this is governance around allergens. So we now have menus that are gluten, nut, milk, soya free. We have new vegetarian and vegan options that have been added. Everything's certified as compliant nutritionally with Welsh Government, which is great, and it gives kids some extra options. We've done a lot of engagement with parents and pupils, and we've started cooking things a little bit differently. So things like curries and lasagnas, in the past, part of those might have been brought in. Now they're all done from scratch and they're amazing. There's an increasing spend on ingredients and options available to pupils, which has been fantastic. And our good citizenship. So the council's climate emergency and Project Zero is something that we're heavily involved with in terms of the equipment that we use on site, and the sustainability using local suppliers where we can. And we've done a big piece of work around the sustainability supply chain. And the big deal, though, is the investment program. This is the bit that counts, and it says on the right-hand side, it's a big deal, and it is a massive deal. And we're very proud of this. So we were in a position at the end of the autumn term. We made a good, healthy profit, and we were able to do a payout to our schools as part of our profit share, as we promised them. That was a total of £255,000. That was a £5,000 check to every school in the Vale to say thank you for working with us. Here's your part of the profits of our successes and from what we've learned over the past 6 years. On top of that, we set up a school and community fund, and we had 60k available to our schools to bid on for projects, and I'll touch on those shortly. We've set up a good citizenship fund, so we've had some local community events, so folks running football clubs, for example. We've sponsored kit, we've sponsored ads for local drama clubs, that kind of thing, which has been fantastic. I mentioned the ingredients and the quality there, that additional 5p per meal. Doesn't sound like that, but when you put it within the context of 1.7 million meals being served over 190 days, it actually adds up. So that comes to about 88k, and what that means is roast dinner day, we've got an option of 3 vegetables instead of 2. Not everyone likes peas, but they might like something else, so now they've got a bit more choice, which is fantastic. And then our operations and development side of things. So this is a capital reserve for our assets. So this is if we need to upgrade any equipment or buy anything in new to support our schools, that's where that comes from. It's not going to be top sliced. And then commercial development. So the more we can bring in, the more that can go out, as we demonstrated. So that's, in my view, amazing. Some of this year's funded programs, the board met earlier this week and approved a lot of these. And this is, again, something I'm especially proud of, working with our schools really closely. We had a lot of engagement on this, and we were able to fund all of the projects, most of them fully, a couple of them partially, that were submitted. And this is the kind of stuff that they're doing with this money. So we have well-being hubs, which are being established at schools. We have a nutrition pod, which is a steel container, which is going to be upgraded, and pupils are going to be able to use that as a space to learn about cooking and eating. We've got some proposals for breakfast clubs and after-school clubs in secondary education. So this is at Pencoitra. This is a school that has one of the highest levels of FSM in the country, that's done a ton of work over the past few years to support their kids. And one of the things that we learned over lockdown is the impact on food on some of these more vulnerable kids. So that's an excellent program that's going to be able to start soon. We have some after-school enrichment clubs that schools are being put on, homework clubs and enrichment clubs. We've got some new outdoor gardens and cooking areas that schools are putting in, alfresco dining areas, snack shacks, which are going to be run by some of the MAT pupils, which is great, in support for 4 schools. Programs like Eating and Cooking for Life, which are going to be delivered to pupils and staff, and then some kitchen enhancements. All of these ideas belong to their respective schools. We're just fitting the bill for these. But it's when we talk about impact, I think that says it all, that Not only were we able to give them a bit of cash, but we were able to fund these projects, which are going to have a lasting impact and legacy going forward. We have some school-based priorities that are coming up in 2021. So we're looking at a new cashless catering solution in secondary schools. This will allow things like pre-ordering, click and collect by pupils. There's some learning from the last 20 months, I suppose, through there, which has fed into that. We've got a free breakfast pilot scheme funded by Welsh Government for Year 7s, which we're looking forward to bringing forward. The menus that I mentioned that are coming out, some of the theme days and curriculum-led food themes required by schools and reflective of the new curriculum, which are coming out, and some more work with parents and families. Parents especially have been really engaged in the type of stuff we've been able to do and cook for schools. And there's a lot of brilliant work that's been going on in schools that the Vale has done, which has piqued a lot of interest. So we're going to capitalize on that interest and add in support where we can for it. Gratitude is the best attitude, and I have to say one of the things that's made this program work, and I said it at the beginning in terms of defining our culture, was the trust and relationships that we have with our head teachers who've been part of this process from the beginning. The flexibility and freedom to operate that we had from directors, the MD and members and folks such as yourself, having gone through scrutiny with us a number of times, and the trust placed in us to deliver these things. All credit goes to those staff who worked formerly for Vale Catering Services and now for Big Fresh Catering Services, because that was a big leap for them. Like I said, to go into a room to 170 staff and say everything you've known about your working life for the last 20 years, we're going to change and we're going to make it better and we're going to give you opportunities. They trusted us to deliver that. And with them working with us, we were able to and deliver some of that impact. And it would be remiss of me not to throw this up on the last screen. So you'll be pleased to know I'm just about done. This is our mission statement. This is our view. We're bursting with fresh ideas and innovative menus. We're big on supplying catering to schools, businesses and communities. When our super chefs and delivery teams have finished cooking up delicious, innovative meals, they look at how the profits can go back into schools to do some good. Every single coffee that folks buy from us, every single school dinner, all goes back into schools and delivers the stuff that I just talked about. We're big, we're fresh, we're friendly. Come and have a chat today. And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you very much, Trevor. Very interesting presentation. And as I say, we've got to take an opportunity at some time in the future to come and sample the wares, but we'll see what we can do. Before bringing any members in, I don't know whether Carol wants to add anything to what Trevor has said.
I think from myself and the team, it's just onwards and upwards, and everybody's thoroughly enjoying what they're doing. We've had some secondment opportunities that have come, staff have come out of schools and have gone across to the Peer. And I don't think we'll ever get them back into schools once they've tasted the commercial side of things. And we've just, we've got a fantastic team. They're doing some fantastic work with, all of our schools, which are fab, and customers in Penarth. And we're just looking to, to move forward really on what else we can do. So it's exciting times.
Okay, thank you for that. I can see I've got the cabinet member on to speak, but before bringing her in, I wonder whether any of the anyone from any of the schools wants to add anything. No, the schools obviously. Oh, yes.
I suppose I'd just like to say how delighted we are with the way things have moved forward. In Kadakstan particularly, it's been a little bit of a mission of ours over the last few years, and to see where we are now in terms of the service we have for our children, it's fantastic. To have £5,000 come into our school budget is a wonderful thing, and the fact that we really are working with Big Fresh to make the offer to our children the best it can be. We couldn't be happier with the way things are going. So thank you, Trevor, thank you, Carol, thank you to the whole team.
Thanks, Janet.
Thank you for that. I can see that Well, perhaps we'll go through the order we've got them now on the showing, indicating. Next, I'll go to the cabinet member.
Thank you, Chair. I must be honest, I probably got too huge a lump in my throat after watching that to speak for any length of time. It's difficult to realise just how long ago this idea started. And it was a dream. We thought we could do it. And to be fair, Trevor, Carol and Simon as well have delivered on that, and it's been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, who would you say when you're only a few months into opening, into startup, and you say, do you fancy a challenge? You say, do you want to talk about the Peer Pavilion? And then if you have been there, you'll see what a phenomenal success they've turned around. And I remember a day a few weeks ago, I was there for a meeting, and we were sitting around a big table in the hall, and one of the staff came in and said, would you mind moving to a smaller table, because we've got a family of 6 that want to eat, and it's all money, isn't it? So shipped us all off onto a different table, and quickly cleaned it all down. In terms of, do you want to go and visit? Yeah, they would be delighted if you went to visit. However, they deliver. And I have to say, I have had far too many grazing boxes and afternoon teas delivered, as Carol would attest. So that was a bit of a struggle during pandemic, but they are worth every penny. And it was a really good way of celebrating people's birthdays, of arranging to have afternoon teas delivered to them. Very, very good value. 2 real things I want to say. One is I actually took one of the good practice team from Wales Audit. I met them at the pavilion to show them what we'd done, and he was absolutely blown away. And he said, have you been telling people about this? And I said, well, been too busy doing it to start off with, but actually I think this is something that we need to share. I talked to education cabinet members across Wales yesterday about it when we were discussing the challenges on school meal services, and one of my colleagues was talking about how they changed contract to reduce costs. Now, we didn't just reduce costs, we obliterated them. So there is no deficit to this council now. There is just a surplus, which is doing good for our schools, and that is the huge message. This is profit with a purpose, and it has been delivered absolutely over our wildest dreams. So a huge thank you, and I'll be down for a bacon bat very soon.
Okay, Neil.
Thanks, Chair. Liz has stole some of my thunder, but thank you first of all, Trevor, for your presentation. I'm in awe of you and your team and what you've been doing. I have the privilege that the peers, and particularly the cafe side of it, is in my ward, and I have been down there. I have used it. It is extremely good. It is extremely good value for money, and you don't need to organise meetings and stuff. You can just rock up and walk in. So I'd urge any councillors who haven't done that so far to do so and enjoy the experience. Sunny Penarth is always worth a visit. Having said that, the fact that the whole premise of the thing is to support the council rather than the council support the catering service. It is a new way of looking at things, and is a model which perhaps can be adopted by other councils around the country. But we are the sector leaders on this. It's a good news story, and I'm immensely proud of you, even if I do dispute what you say about both poutine and ice hockey. Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. Next, we have Widmore High now.
Hi, yeah, Vince Bro. I think I don't want to steal Lee Humphrey's thunder, but I will say I think some of the things you're going to hear from him and from Janet show that some of the support from Big Fresh. I think for me, perhaps more importantly than anything else, is providing vital and innovative support for our most challenged learners. And I think, as I say, I think you will see that in the presentation. I certainly know from Lee Humphreys tonight. And we will therefore, I think, be developing provision that will be looked at in other authorities in terms of the way that we support our most challenged pupils. What I would point, when you ask for a comment, I think, and it's different, and I have experience of different authorities, the thing that I would want to point out to a scrutiny committee is it's indicative of a way of working between the local authority and schools that is not necessarily commonly found around Wales. So, you know, throughout the pandemic, and this is a striking example because huge support has been given, the way the officers of the local authority and the schools have worked together is something that I think the local authority should be proud of. You know, we felt hugely supportive, we felt listened to, and to me, that part of the presentation, the way that the central education services in this way and the schools have worked together throughout the pandemic, and I think the relationships that have developed moving forward is something that is not commonly or universally found across Wales. So that was the point that I'd like to make.
Thank you very much. Sandra Perks.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if there's a view by the Big Fresh Catering Company to expand into different parts of the Vale as well in the future, because obviously it's a success and a welcome, success. Oh, I can't even speak. Success for us as a scrutiny, but also for the schools as well, and to see the money going back into the schools. So that was one of my questions. The other question I have is whether there's the opportunity for pupils who are doing catering, perhaps GCSE or something like that, for them to do sort of work experience within the Big Fresh at sometimes, whether that's a possibility or not. So those just a couple of questions that I had.
I think if I take the work experience one first, it's a programme we've had ever since I've been with Vale Catering. We do have opportunities on an annual basis for pupils to come into the schools. Obviously, we don't like them in the school that they generally go to because it's everybody's coming to the counter and chit-chatting. But we do have that opportunity in all of the schools. So we've got lots of policy around that. But yes, we could definitely look at work experience now in the commercial sector so that they could come across to the cafe to start learning about, dealing with customers, dealing with, machinery, dealing with tills, dealing with, the products that we're serving. And in terms of expanding in the Vale, we do want to expand further. We still feel like we're learning our trade from a commercial point of view, and we don't want to run before we can walk, although everybody gets very excited about what's the next thing on offer. The key for us is we're a tackle trading company, which means that we can only trade up to 20% of our school meals turnover, which is our core business. So at the moment, we've got to be very careful that we're not actually earning more from our commercial business than tackle allows us. To take on more opportunities could be a little bit of a risk for us in terms of the legal issues. So we have already started talking to Vicky Davidson, our company secretary, at the board meetings on we may need to look for a different model very soon so that we can trade more and take on more commercial opportunities. So for us, we never thought we would be in this position so early on that we would be looking at, more commercial opportunities. And we are. Everybody is, chomping at the bit, wanting to know what's next. Even though we're trying to settle ourselves into, being a barmaid and pulling the pints, that's been a learning curve for us. But everyone's just queuing up to want to work, either over at the cafe or in the bar area. So it's it's all still so very exciting for us, and we've, you know, the opportunity landed in our laps. We had 3 weeks to get the cafe open from the time the council had the keys. And if we, you know, and we did it, because that's what we do. That's what we do as a catering service. Give us a challenge and we're off and running. So yes to both things.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I think, was I right in seeing sort of very near after Trevor had finished the presentation, Lee Humphreys, you wanted to say something? Or were you just waving to show how friendly you were?
Yeah, a bit of both, I think, to be honest with you. No, I just wanted to second what Carol was saying with regards to the work experience. You know, just from first hand, really, Carol and I have met on numerous occasions, and we will be providing opportunities for some of our learners at Penarth to be involved in some catering work experience across the Vale through Big Fresh. So I just wanted to second that, really. Okay, well, thank you very much. Well, again, Trevor, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you to you and Carol for all the work you do to have made this a great success, and hopefully we'll look to it expanding further.
Pleasure, thank you.
So really what you need to do is make lots more money out of your out of the schools side of it, so that you can get out and do a bit more generally.
Thanks, Gordon.
Okay, thanks. Can I suggest that we've got a number of people who are going to present or contribute to our agenda item 6, the use and impact of the pupil development grant. So perhaps if members are happy, we'll take that as the next item on the agenda. Well, I don't know whether you're happy with it or not, but that's what we're going to do. So, yes, so that's jumping ahead now. So I got my agenda all set up for what we're going to do. So who's going to present that?
I'm going to start.
Yeah, you're going to start.
I'll start, Chair. So good evening, everybody. There are 2 parts to this next session. Firstly, I'll take you briefly through the written report on the use and impact of the Pupil Development Grant. Then there'll be presentations from schools, first of all from Oakfield and Kadakstan primary schools, and then from Penarth High, and they'll be outlining how they're using the grant and its impact. And I'd also like to draw attention to the fact that in terms of schools, you'll see in the written report that there are several cameos, and they outline the work of several schools across the local authority as well. And we're also joined tonight by John Welch. He's a strategic lead for equity and wellbeing at Central South Consortium, and he's supported in drafting this report as well. So we will be happy to take any questions at the end of the presentation, but I think I'll start now and just take you briefly through the written report to begin with. So in terms of the report, it summarises the findings of discussions held between improvement partners in Central South Consortium and school leaders in the Vale of Glamorgan regarding the use and impact of the Pupil Development Grant, the PDG. The PDG was introduced in 2012. And the purpose, when it was introduced by Welsh Government, was to provide additional funding to schools based on the number of pupils eligible for free school meals, EFSM, or children who are looked after. In terms of allocation, and just to give so you have some indication how much that means to certain schools, in 2020-21, Welsh Government allocated to schools £1,150 for every EFSM pupils in years 1 to 11. And then in terms of early years, £700 for every pupil in nursery and reception classes in terms of the EFSM or CLAR pupils. So that's in terms of the allocation of funding. And as part of the report, there is an Appendix 1, just a brief summary in terms of the range of allocation that different schools in the local authority have received. If we then go on to look at how the PDG funding is used in schools, you'll see that it's used to support a wide range of different types of activity, primarily to support the development of literacy and numeracy skills, but also a very strong focus on improving pupils' well-being. There's also a focus on supporting professional learning for staff, in particularly in relation to trauma-informed strategies and support for children who appear to have suffered adverse childhood experiences. There's also support and the funds is used to support family engagement work as well in a number of Wales schools. And as with any grant, there's also an element of monitoring, particularly to monitor the impact. And in terms of the Wales schools, you will see in terms of monitoring the impact that there's reference here to looking at the skills and numeracy skills of pupils and looking at the analysis of the progress that they make. And then looking at pupils' progress data, a wide range of well-being data. Also, you can consider attendance data, exclusion data, and also findings from monitoring activities undertaken in schools. And then also, as part of the feedback, schools in the Vale also involve stakeholders such as pupils, parents, teachers, external agencies to have their views in terms of the impact of the grant. What I would like to say, just before we move on, again, just for you to be aware that obviously the impact of COVID has impacted on this work in terms of the monitoring of schools, as you can imagine, but that gives you a flavour in terms of the range of activities undertaken by schools in relation to monitoring of this grant. In terms of a key factor for us, which is very timely at the moment, is the issue of sustainability. And just to raise with you in a sense that there is uncertainty about the long-term future of the grant. And it's just something that we think it's very important that you know as members, but it's a big uncertainty for a number of our schools. You'll see in the report that the report states that many schools note that when staff have developed professionally as a result of this grant, such as the focus on teaching and learning and approaches to supporting well-being, those approaches are now embedding well as part of school life. And as a result, you can say that those actions are sustainable and that they have built capacity in school. But there is a majority of schools in the Vale that report that any reduction in PDG would impact on the level of support and interventions available to EFSM pupils. So, you know, that it will have an impact. If this grant does go, it will have an impact on the most vulnerable pupils and some of the systems and processes and, you know, sort of that they developed in schools to support pupils. And one example is noted there, for example, is the use of the family engagement officer. A number of schools have reported that that would be challenging to sustain without the use of the grant. I've mentioned professional learning a few times, and actually this relates closely to the presentation on well-being that you received in the summer term as members. But, you know, sort of what's been a strong feature in Vale schools in relation to the use of the PDG grant has been state training staff and ensuring that staff have professional learning in relation to trauma-informed practices. So we've got whole school training being delivered. We've also got key members of staff undertaking the trauma-informed schools diploma. And as you're aware from the wellbeing presentation back in the summer term, this aligns very closely with local authority priorities. I am going to mention COVID again, in terms of, because one of the questions that were discussed with leaders was what changes have schools made to the PDG plans for this year. Now, this is obviously going back to last financial year, and there were adaptations because of COVID. And you will see in the responses at the bottom of page 7 that there's reference there to some of the supports that have been provided, particularly in relation to literacy, numeracy and well-being. Some of those moved online for pupils, and some of those happened on site. Schools made sure that they targeted some of those most vulnerable pupils to attend schools during the lockdown period to ensure that they had the support and they had, sort of the key support and access to staff that they needed during this period of time. There was also a key focus by schools to increase their efforts to ensure that pupils had access to appropriate IT equipment. And there was also, as well, a very strong focus on providing bespoke support for the families of EFSM pupils. And I think you'll hear more about this as well in the presentations by schools next. But in terms of that support for key members and for key families, that included weekly food parcels, there were activity packs for families, there were things like virtual coffee mornings held for parents, and there was dedicated support phone lines for families to contact the school. So those are just a few examples of the support provided for the most vulnerable families. It's the so what question then in terms of the impact of the grant. And this next section at the bottom of page 8 just gives you a flavour of some of the impact that the use of the PDG grant has had in Vale schools during the last financial year. The majority of schools report that there's been good engagement by EFSM pupils during the lockdown. Lots of schools also make reference to the bespoke learning or well-being provision having a positive impact on pupils' well-being and also in their engagement with the online provision, and as a result making good progress with their learning. There's a few schools that report that pupils' IT skills improved. And then a minority of schools, and I'm using, I should say, when I'm using the terminology minority, I'm talking about 40% of schools also report that many EFSM pupils have not regressed in their basic skills. And you've got a few schools that report that EFSM pupils have made at least the expected level of progress. A few schools did report that there has been regression in pupils' oracy and number skills, and they've referenced that particularly happening in the foundation phase. But what they've also reported is once the pupils were back in schools following the lockdown at the end of the spring term, they did note that those pupils in particular made good progress since returning to school, and they feel that the school have supported the pupils well to move forward in their skill development. The focus on pupils' well-being and the remote learning also resulted in positive attendance and re-engagement of EFSM pupils. And what you have got here in the report is a reference to half the school in the Vale reporting that pupils came back to school happy and that they were settled back in quickly into the school routine. Another impact is in relation to the trauma-informed training. And because of the strong focus on trauma-informed, a number of schools are reporting that there's more consistency now in strategies being used, especially when pupils are having difficulties in regulating their emotions. And there's also, as a result, a greater awareness of ACEs amongst all staff members. And another key impact, and again, I'm sure we'll come back to this in the presentations with schools, is that a minority of schools report that there is now, as a result of the lockdown and as a result of the work with more vulnerable families, there is now a more effective liaison and partnership in place with parents and carers of EFSM pupils. That greater communication, the working with the families, the providing the food parcels and so forth, that's led to a better relationship, and schools are reporting that parents and carers are now more aware of how they can support their children's learning at home. In terms of the other questions that was considered as part of the discussions, there's reference to the main concerns regarding EFSM pupils in terms of this financial and academic year as well. And yes, there is concern about the impact of the lockdown on EFSM learners, and again, particularly in relation to their skills development, in terms of their well-being, behaviour, and ensuring that their basic needs are met. And what you have got at the beginning of page 11 of the report is a list of the types of activity that the schools want to promote further and make further use of the PDG grant this financial year in order to support and address those areas of concerns. So you will see reference there to specific literacy and numeracy interventions. There's reference to wellbeing support, making use again of trauma-informed strategies, giving opportunities for Year 6 pupils to attend transition activities, and then deploying additional staff, for example, to build relationships with key people and to strengthen activities in terms of its outdoor provision as well. There's also a focus in a number of schools in terms of staff training, again focusing on well-being and trauma-informed and mental health training. And I'm just drawing attention here to a regional and national PDG Focus Week that was held back in March 2021. This was a national event that shared best practice across schools regarding provision and progress and impact on vulnerable learners. And there was a number of workshops and discussions as part of this week. And these materials have now been all shared with Vale schools, and hopefully that will support work further in this area. And just to conclude, just to say in a sense that this work is ongoing, and obviously the questions that we've reported on as part of the written report is something that we're still continuing to consider with schools. It's a focus of discussions for improvement partners and leaders, again as part of the work for this academic year. And the focus remains on, again, how the grant is being used, but also more importantly about the impact of the grant. And another strong focus again is to continue to share effective practice in relation to the use of the grant. So I'm conscious it's been a whistle-stop tour through the written report, but I know you had access to the written report prior to the meeting. But I thought it would be good at this point as well for you to hear about the experiences of schools and how they have been using the grant and the impact of the grant. So I'm going to pass first of all to Oakfield and Kadakstan School. So I'm going to invite Janet Hayward to begin with. Janet is the executive head teacher of both primary schools, and we're also joined by Rhea Milton, who's the head of school at Kadakstan. So diolch yn fawr, Janet, I'll pass over to you now.
Diolch, Carys. Hello, everybody. There's a lot that Carys has spoken there. I suppose what I'll be doing is illustrating how that looks in Kadakstan and in Oakfield. The Pupil Development Grant was actually called the Pupil Deprivation Grant when it came into being back in 2012. And that was soon after I moved from Barry Island to Kadakstan. And it was an absolute delight, really, that happened. Many grants are short term, but not this one. It's carried on. And it's been used fundamentally to close the gap in attainment then between free school meal children and non-free school meal children. That gap is often spoken about. Kadakstan at the time, back in 2012, was 45% free school meals. And as Carrie says, that equates to about £1,000 per child, with coming on board then funding for early years children, reception and nursery children as well. Over the years in Kadakstan, we've used the money for learning support for identified children, particularly things like speech and language, for children coming in who have a very low baseline, interventions for reading and all sorts of things. We've used it for reducing costs for things like swimming and trips, sometimes making activities free, making sure that school uniform is really affordable is something that is top of our list to do. But we've also used the grant for addressing physical needs for food and for clothes, you know, if children aren't well equipped and their physical and emotional needs addressed, then they're not going to learn. Really, a lot of our funding is used for LSAs, learning support assistants, who are those extra available adults to work with children. And really ensuring that the curriculum is relevant and exciting for the children, and providing opportunities and experiences that children from different backgrounds perhaps wouldn't enjoy. So, you know, a real example is, you know, of making sure that we're giving a level playing field to our children is taking them out and making sure that, for example, they enjoy really learning about the world around them, and doing things that families perhaps that we would do with our own children do with children out of school. Digital opportunities and really working with the outdoors, and also working with families is very important. That's developed over the years. Going back to 2011 and before, there was a lot that happened with community focused schools, and I know that that is very much on the Welsh Government agenda to come back into vogue now, but we've managed to build on that over the years. Supporting with trauma-informed approaches for parents is really important. Really looking at things like nutrition and sleep at home as well as in school, supporting parents with behaviour of their children at home, credit union work, and signposting parents to support beyond school. Really looking at attendance and what is preventing children from coming to school, and supporting parents on with their, and professional learning for staff is key to all of this. And we know if a child hasn't their basic needs met physically and they're feeling safe, they have no chance of learning anything. And obviously COVID has had a real impact on all of this. But just to look at Kadakstan right now, we're currently on 33% free school meals. That's 500 children, and that equates to £178,000 a year. That sounds a lot. How is it spent? Well, it physically breaks down to 8 learning support assistants, and that money is then gone. But those learning support assistants in their roles, as Cara said, are critical to the way that the school works now. So we have a learning support assistant who is based in the community centre, and she is that family support. She runs SHEP. She runs workshops for parents. She runs breakfast club that is now spread across the school. And it's really difficult to imagine how we would work without that role in place. We have an LSA who heads up all of the social and emotional work amongst other LSAs. She brings children out in groups, works through emotions. When we talk about trauma-informed approaches, we have a programme called Emotional, which identifies children's needs, whether they are suffering from anxiety, whether it's panic, whether it's grief, and what are the things that need to be put into place for those children. We have a lot of learning support assistants in the foundation phase, but there isn't funding necessarily in place for children once they get to year 3, key stage 2. So we're managing to fund extra support for those children in class, which is the best way. Children need extra available adults to thrive. We know that, and that's what this funding also does. Also, we have catch-up interventions in place. So, you know, there are times when children need to come out and have that extra reading support, or need to have that one-to-one support outside of the classroom, and that happens. Also, as Caris mentioned, there are some children who come back, particularly after COVID, and find it difficult to regulate their behaviour. We have members of staff who are funded to put in one-to-one support for those children. Interestingly, we've also had accelerated learning grant money provided as an outcome of COVID, and that money has been really used to support some of our youngest children who found it difficult to come back into school, but also really supporting some of those children higher up the school in year 6 with some basic skills as they move on to year 7. And that 178,000 is out of an overall budget of 1.8 million in Kadakstan. Just to contrast, in Oakfield currently has 66% of children entitled to free school meals. Oakfield has about 200 children, but that's 135,000. We also employ 8 learning support assistants from PDG. In Oakfield, the way they're used is parallel and different at the same time. But we have a family support officer who does an incredible job again at Oakfield. We didn't have a home for her, so when I first got to Oakfield, we actually erected a shed in the car park. We call it the lodge, and it has a lovely feel to it. But parents are able to come there and have a safe space where they can come and have a coffee and talk through difficulties, and also be signposted. There's a lot of work that goes on there as well with liaison with social services, but that same kind of work in terms of support to children happens with LSAs. Going forward, the grant has allowed for systemic change. It's reframed our thinking. You know, I can remember when I was first ahead at Barry Island Primary School, there was very much that thinking that what goes on out of school isn't our problem. And that if children were coming to school unregulated and not ready to learn, well, that was the fault of the families and perhaps the fault of the children, and they were seen to be naughty children. We've come a million miles from there. We need to support families. We understand that there are parents who haven't done well in school themselves, that they're suffering from mental health issues, from drug addiction, from loneliness, from domestic violence, and everything that really is associated with poverty. We see that coming in through the police reports all of the time. We have to support children who are suffering with trauma, who start with a low baseline of poor social skills and speaking and listening skills, and who aren't toilet trained. Trauma-informed approaches have taken us a long way, and we really need those available adults for children. And we've always known that, but that's really backed by the science now, and we know that as schools. Enriching the curriculum is absolutely crucial to this. Forest schools and beach schools are something that happen regularly in Kadakstan now. We have chickens in Oakfield, and they provide such a source of delight to the children, but also regulate behaviour and ensure that they're ready to learn. Residentials, I've just come back from 2 nights away at Llangranog this week with year 5 and 6 from the 2 classes, and I stood looking out to see, thinking to myself, do you know what, this is absolute success as far as I'm concerned for our schools. 150 children away learning and growing and enjoying together, and really experiencing something that they haven't done before. And if that isn't addressing the needs of those children, then absolutely nothing is. They now feel a real team spirit with their new teachers, with their new classes, and that is going to put them in great stead as they go forward over this next year. Real joined up thinking has come out of things like our Big Box Bwyd project in Kadakstan. We started with a work with our Cadog's Corner shop, having waste food and food from Fair Share in a shop, making sure that it was available as pay-as-you-feel prices to parents, but at the same time making authentic learning experiences with the children, so that yes, they were getting the food, but they were learning to cook with the food. They are learning to cook with the food. We need our children to be ambitious, capable, switched-on learners. We want them to be aspirational, and for them and their parents to understand that they deserve the best. I think quite often they have that feeling that, you know, they'll get what's just good enough, and actually, no, that's not good enough. We need the best for these children. So a lot of time and effort has gone into developing our curriculum offer around how can we get the most out of learning with our children being outdoors, growing their food and cooking their own food. And there is an open day in Kadakstan. I'll mention a flyer's gone out to the local authority and to CSE for an open day on the 30th of September, 10 till 2 o'clock. Come and see the first shop in Kadakstan. There are many of these now that are spreading across South Wales, 10 till 2 on the 30th of September. But that is really, really something that our children and families are enjoying and is growing all of the time. As our children move on to secondary school, the examination system is set up, isn't it, so that 30% of the children will fail. That is a sad indictment of where we are with examinations, and that's why a lot of our parents feel the way they do, I think, about school. That has to change going forward. But in Kadakstan, I can say that nearly all of our children start below the expected level, but nearly all leave at the expected level, and 50% leave at above the expected level. And that is when you measure English, maths and science. However, most importantly, I know that nearly every child in both schools are delighted to come to school every day, and that is a measure of success. That is what we go to school for. We measure children's well-being through selfie data and through emotional data, but it's a real joy to see that the new Weston framework is all about what is the well-being of our children, do they want to come to school, and what is the progress that they've made. So we know that you know our children start low, but they have to have the best. So just to conclude, PDG has allowed systemic and cultural change as we work as schools, working with every child as an individual, and seeing our role as not just to teach them, but to support their whole self and enabling them to thrive and their whole family to thrive is absolutely critical. The new curriculum, the new inspection framework, the ALN bill is all tied together as we go forward. And obviously there's so much more work to do. So exciting to be working with Pencoitra now, supporting individual children and families as we go forward. And it's really great stuff to listen to the way that Lee speaks about the way that we are going to continue to work together as schools, as a cluster in Pencoitra. So diolch. PDG is something that has made a huge difference, but we need it to stay. Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr, Janet. I think you made a natural link to the next presentation, actually. I shouldn't really have interrupted at all. But diolch yn fawr for that. Now we'll move on to Lee Humphreys from Pencoitra. Lee is the head of school at Pencoitra, and he's also joined by Vince Brown, the executive head teacher of Pencoitra and Whitmore. So shall I pass on to you, Lee?
Yeah, thanks, Caris. Right, I'm just going to present a screen. Can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
Right, okay. Yeah, Thanks, Janet, for the kind, for the insightful, kind words earlier on as well. I kind of looked at this presentation in thirds and with regards to the PDG strategy at Pencoitra High School and what it was like before COVID, what it was like during COVID, and kind of where we are going forward in the future. So I will rattle through. I got 26 slides, and as Dr. Brown knows, I like to talk. So I'm going to rattle through quite a few of them, but I will make these slides available to everyone, and if anybody has any subsequent questions after, please feel free just to give me an email anyway. So prior to COVID, lots of the stuff in terms of the deployment of the PDG was exactly what Janet said: support and learning, provide enrichment, and develop an aspiration for all our learners, to ensure that we can close the gap on those children who are eligible for free school meals, those who are not. In terms of supporting learners, some of the key strategies through from September 2019 to March 2020 was ensuring that we have a really robust attendance strategy, and that staff are aware, form tutors are aware, heads of year we're aware of all the needs of the learners, and made robust communication with home to ensure that if there was any support that we needed to put in place for families, that was made regular and often, to ensure that we get the children in school, because ultimately, if they're not in school, they're not learning. Going through to providing in-class support, we also looked at a huge range of extracurricular clubs that were on offer to, again, to reiterate what has been mentioned earlier, to lots of our pupils miss out on experiences compared to others who can. So ultimately, the use of the PDG was to ensure that there are a variety of experiences for the children through extracurricular opportunities and subsidising trips and workshops, and also ensuring that uniform was always readily at hand. Was a big part of the PDG. Well, also we pride ourselves at Pencoitra of not setting anybody any kind of glass ceilings at all. Everybody has the opportunity to maximise their potential, regardless of their socio-economic background. So development of MAP programs and being involved in the SERI network is also quite important to us. Using the price of pupil poverty guides and working with Kate Thomas in 2019 through to March 2020, that ultimately then led us into COVID. And I'm sure everybody's aware of the impact, both financially on parents and emotionally on families and staff in school, during this period. And I'd like to put on record, before I kind of go into COVID, really the outstanding efforts made by all at Pencoitra High School. The teaching staff, the support staff, really stepped up and it really did a duty of care to all our community, through that time. And one of the byproducts, as Kadakstan mentioned earlier, was the breakdown. Some of the relationships that were perhaps prior to COVID not as healthy as what they could have been between parents and school. We have seen an increased improvement in parental engagement and parental relationships, because we were out knocking doors, we were out taking food parcels, we were out taking rewards pizzas and making regular contact on a day-to-day basis. So that's been a positive, really. A huge job of work was done, and thanks and thank you to the local authority and I suppose consortium and Welsh Government as well for the support we had in terms of getting getting digital devices and ensure those who with digital poverty were able to carry on their education at home through our blended learning through our blended learning provisions. We had to flip, even from a teaching and learning point of view. We had to stop and just change every kind of thing, every kind of ethos we had with regards to teaching and learning, because I don't suppose any of us went into teaching to teach from home in front of a computer, and the professional learning that staff kind of undertook in such a short space of time was inspirational to see. I mean, it was a real Dunkirk spirit of Pencoitra, and it was a real coming together of all the staff and working so hard, morning, noon, and night, really, to ensure that each member of staff had the skills to be able to deliver the best possible online lessons, stroke blended learning provisions we possibly could. We also, one thing in which we prided ourselves through the lockdown at Pencoitra was, even though we was really proud of upskilling our staff and the advancements in pedagogy, in such a short space of time was great, but it was key to us to measure the engagement of the learners, because if they're not if they're not learning, then ultimately everything we were doing was redundant, really. So we developed a sector leading engagement tracker where on a 2-weekly cycle we would always send reports through to parents and through our electronic provisions in school so a parent is fully in the loop with the progress their child was making through that period of time. So COVID came, and it was such a rapid shift in focus for us all. But like I said, coming together as a community, both staff, support staff in school, and then ultimately out into the community, has done us as a community, quite well, really, because it's brought us tighter together. The work that we did during that time was recognised by Kate Thomas, who was the Price of Pupil Poverty Development Officer for Children in Wales, wherein one of the reports that was written, we at Pencoitra High School was mentioned, for all the hard work carried out by staff during that moment in time. So going forward in terms of the PDG, it's kind of been invaluable, really, to us to ensure that we can put all the provisions in place that we can for all of our learners. Just to kind of reiterate what Janet was saying earlier in terms of the deployment of the PDG, lots of our PDG money is going towards those additional available adults, especially in the learning support area of the school. One thing that we also ensure at Pencoitra is, due to our changing cohort as we transition towards a 50% school where pupils are eligible for free school meals, is to ensure that we don't have our class sizes too big. We purposely build our curriculum plan to ensure that we have a lower than normal pupil to teacher ratio, so that we can have those small focus groups, so that we can have our key teachers carrying out literacy and numeracy interventions. We invested through the PDG quite significantly in the GL assessment suite to ensure that we found out through data when children came back to school, first of all, did they have any academic regression, but it also allowed us through selfie and through things like School to measure their well-being during that time as well. So it's been invaluable, really, to allow us to be able to do so. We've also, at Pencoitra, as we try, as I said earlier on, as we transition through really into 50% free school meals, we've had to think entirely differently about our provisions in school. We've had to think entirely differently about our curriculum to engage our learners. We've had to think entirely differently about our well-being provisions in school, because again, to repeat what Janet said, we see on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, the PPNs, the police protection notices that come into school on a regular basis. So we see what's happening in the community, and we have to ensure that we have staff who are trained. We have emotional available adults for children, so that those role models, so that those relationships can be forged to ultimately allow them to continue through school in the best possible fashion. We've started alternative provisions for some of our more challenging children in our Success of Futures Centre, and I cannot really thank the local authority enough for supporting us in the development of our RISE provision, which is a nurture provision for our Year 7 and the Year 8 pupils. And one thing I'm really excited about is that we're developing our Haven project in school, where we are paying particular focus on those children who are persistent non-attenders, and those who are on the cusp of becoming persistent non-attendants. you know, through well-being issues, especially through COVID. So I'm excited to see how that kind of develops over time also. We've totally changed the way in which, you know, we're working with, you know, with our wellbeing hubs, and it's huge in terms of collaboration for us, you know, collaborating with the local authority, collaborating with the consortium, and, you know, also collaborating with our primary feeders. And, you know, Janet and I were only talking on the phone this week about an exciting project that we've got planned to commence before Christmas this year, and how, you know, and taking some of the lessons really that have been told by, and lessons that have been learned by colleagues in the primary feeder, and how we can have a more robust transition and meaningful experiences, and how we can you know, take the ideas like the shop and apply them to the secondary context. So, you know, I'm really looking forward to building those collaborative, you know, enhancing those collaborative relationships going forward. Trauma informed is, you know, is huge for us. We've set ourselves a target of becoming a trauma informed school. That's the basis really, and that's the basis that we are building. That's the foundation that we are building up off, and to ensure that we have a number of significantly experienced and qualified and trained adults in school, and a support team who are well versed in those skills is only going to be hugely beneficial to enhancing the culture, and and supporting the children as they transition into teenagehood, and all the challenges that we know that can possess for us. And then, as I said, King COVID, and everybody would wish that COVID didn't happen, and my thoughts and prayers go out to all families during that time. It's been tough for us all, but in any adversity, there's always there's always an opportunity, and there's always a silver lining. And the hub that was set up at Pencoitra High School was truly inspirational to see. It was a joy to go to school every single day, knowing the fact that we had our most vulnerable children in school all day, every day, carrying out a bespoke curriculum, carrying out ensuring that they were still attending the live lessons online, ensuring that we had a variety of different interventions and sporting experiences and thinking experiences and well-being experiences, to ultimately be safe in the knowledge that there are children, they are our most vulnerable children, and it was just inspirational to see. Vince and I have kind of got a saying. I'm sure we watched the film Field of Dreams, where if we build it, they will come. Well, we kind of look at that. We kind of looked at that at the hub, but with a slight twist. If we build it, they will come. But if we build it and we feed them, they will definitely come. And that was, absolutely the case through the lockdown, and the support that we got from Big Fresh during the lockdown to ensure that, regardless, we fed all our children, even if they were, all our vulnerable children, even if children, we decided to that we would feed them anyway, and it changed our thinking. Really, it changed our kind of vision that we had long term for the school was absolutely to be engaging with families more. But this really, this experience during that time really put front and center to us exactly where we're going to be going over the next 18 months to 2 years, in terms of hopefully developing something which is quite special at Pencoitra High School and for our children. So a new way of working moving forwards, really. We are so proud and so appreciative to be walking into a £35 million build very, very shortly. So, thank you to the Vale for providing the community, with this opportunity for us, really. I think the days, especially at school, especially all schools, but especially schools with, with the context that we have at Pencoitra and the community that we serve, I think the days of schools starting at 8:30 and finishing at 3 p.m. are over
for us, we are taking the experiences and the collaborative relationships that that we are developing, and we really see ourselves as a school that is probably going to be starting at 7 in the morning and not closing until 7 in the night. Really, we have some really big ideas and some and some really cool things that hopefully we can develop going forward, and the use of the PDG in terms of enabling us to do that, along with the support that we've had from the local authority and also the CSC with the implementation of the RADI project that's going to be starting soon at Pencoitra, is great. But key and central really is the experiences that we have had at the hub, and we're going to be with the support of Big Fresh, which as Trevor and Carol alluded to and mentioned earlier, we've been successful successful in bidding for a grant that will allow us to achieve what we want to achieve in a lot quicker time. So the relationship that we have with Big Fresh at Pencoitra, is second to none, and I'm sure that we will develop this going forward. So there are lots of benefits that we can have our pupils in the brand new school outside the school, the school day, offering them academic support, offering them well-being support, offering them food, because they will definitely come if we feed them free food. And then also a key thing for me is really for us to increase our community focus. We've got to break down the barriers that some parents have, from perhaps their own experiences and their current social, economic challenges that they have. And it's a really basic dream, but we would like nothing better in the summer than it to be a lovely evening, just like it is tonight. And we've got this big outdoor area where we could have a cinema, and we could invite families up, and we could have some of our children cooking hot dogs and burgers and sitting down with their families and just watching a film, because these are the simple activities that we take for granted really with our children, and lots of the families at Pencoitra don't get those opportunities, and we really want to bridge those gaps to allow them and to be able to afford them those opportunities. So as I said, we want to create a sector leading resource, we've got a world-class facility, and we can have a world-class facility, but it's what goes on inside really that's the important thing, and it's the people and it's the relationships that are forged, between children and staff and children, children and their parents, and staff and and staff and parents, and if we can ensure that each part of that kind of triangle, that kind of triangle of responsibility, and will ensure that that we have a really successful future for all of our children. As I said, we are becoming one of the most challenging schools in Wales. If you take that, me personally, just I was a free school meal child. I won't accept anybody's attitude to a lack of aspiration just because the child comes from perhaps a relatively challenging background. It's up to us really as educationalists and as role models to ensure that these children believe that they can achieve. Lots of this I've already said. Going forward, we genuinely have the opportunity to feed them, to educate them, to give them experiences, to engage with the community, to get outside agencies in the community such as taekwondo, boxing. We got a really strong relationship with Cardiff Blues, chess clubs, reading clubs. The kind of the world, the opportunities are endless really, and we've got to really focus on our strategic plan in terms of ensuring that we develop this provision slowly, just like the hub. But on day one, I can tell you we had 8 children in the hub, and by day end we had 83 children in the hub on a day-to-day basis, and they are considered our most vulnerable and our most challenging children, and they came to school every day and they loved every minute of it. breakfast clubs are important to us, and like I said, we know we need support to reinstate breakfast clubs. And Carol's already alluded to the £1 additional, and we are looking to start up a breakfast club within the next few weeks again. I'm really interested in working with with primary feeders, Jant in particular. We're starting a Pencoitra High School community cluster project going through, and when Janet talks so passionately about the lodge and the family liaison impact that it's had across two rather large and two of our largest feeders, really it baffles me why we don't necessarily have that kind of joined up DNA thinking, really, from the time the children go into primary school to the time they leave at hopefully at 13 in our sixth form. I've talked a lot about our after school provisions and in what we, and there are huge benefits, and the expected results really is quite simple: to break down the barriers, to keep our children in school for longer, to keep them educated for longer, to give them experiences that they wouldn't normally had, to improve relationships with parents, to enhance our collaborative relationships with feeder schools, Big Fresh, the local authority, and the CSC. And I'm sure that looking forward to 3 years time, I was going to say 5 years, but we can't wait 5 years, really. I think hopefully within 3 years we will have something that that we can all be proud of, that children will massively benefit from. We'll hopefully see a decrease in the amount of police protection notices and the amount of fixed term exclusions, even though we work really hard to reduce those currently through our provisions. But I just think this is kind of adding petrol to a flame that's kind of already burning, and then hopefully like I said, in a short space of time, we can really build on the ethos that we learned through the hub, and build on on the ethos that that we try to always ensure that pupils at Pencoitra realise that they can maximise their potential, and the use of the PDG in terms of allowing us to be able to get there is going to be vital over the next the next few years. So thank you for listening. I did try to do that as quickly as I possibly. I don't know if it was 10 minutes, Dr. Brown, but you can give me a row later. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Lee, and thank you to both Lee and Janet for bringing the report to life, and for for showing and sharing with us what is happening in relation to the use of the PDG in their schools. And I'm sure you'd also agree what came through was their passion, for ensuring the best for EFSM pupils. So thank you very much to both of you. Diolch yn fawr, Chair.
Pleasure.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Okay, Neil, you've got a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. Mr. Humphreys referred to the more difficult, more challenging pupils and working with them, and the changes in what's been happening over the last period with the pandemic. And something that's been coming up during our discussions in our meetings through the pandemic is the fact that the school phobic, perhaps we could describe that as, kids have been engaging far better electronically than they and through the new means rather than through the old-fashioned, as it appears to be, the old-fashioned sit down in a classroom method. So my first question relates to that, and whether the Pencoitra particularly, because I imagine it's a major issue in Pencoitra, whether they've got any views on that. And the other thing was that kids from the kind of backgrounds we're talking about, the FSM backgrounds and so on, often have quite low self-worth and very poor pictures of themselves, and whether there's any provision within of using some of this money to work with them in maybe Duke of Edinburgh type schemes where they can learn leadership and self-confidence as a means of supporting their learning. Thank you.
If I start off, Janet and all the other teachers, Rhian and Vince and John, and sorry, apologies if I missed anybody else out. Please feel free to cut across me really from your own experiences. If I'm honest with you, our children couldn't wait to get back to school. We did have positive engagement, and don't get me wrong, we have had some children who have become more anxious about coming back to school, hence us adapting our provisions and ensuring that we support families and support the children through their well-being and to get them back into school. But from my personal experience, standing on the school drive, watching them come back to school, and to see how happy they were to come back to school. By the end of the day, mind you, they realised they were back at school, and kids being kids. But from my point of view, we couldn't wait to get them back, and genuinely they couldn't wait to get back. Some of our children do live in some of the most challenging home circumstances, and even though they were learning online and we provided devices, the environment where they were learning was still particularly challenging for lots. Some of them don't have a table, or a desk in their bedroom where they could settle down, and some of them were having to learn with lots going on, and in the daily life going on around them. So I do believe that we will still see significant negative mental health stroke well-being issues regarding the lockdowns for the foreseeable with some of our young learners, and so there's still a lot of work to do to support them through our well-being provisions and our well-being hubs and a supportive team in school to ensure that that's at a minimum. But yeah, our data told us they couldn't wait to get back to school, if I'm honest with you.
I would come in there and say absolutely that. On the whole, children were delighted to come back to school. When we reflected with our children, there were some who said that there were aspects of being at home that they enjoyed. And some of the year 6 children said, well, actually, perhaps it would be quite nice if we could have maybe 2 days of learning at home and then come in for 3 days a week and have that mix and that blend. So I think there are things that have happened along the way that are making us question what a school day looks like. I think giving children opportunities for leadership is always something that is important, but it's important that our curriculum, that those aspects like D&V aren't bolt-on things. They are things that run through our entire curriculum so that children feel as if they are in charge of their own learning an awful lot of the time. So I think, this time has given us an opportunity to really reflect. It's also given us an opportunity to really reflect on how we engage with parents as well. So the use of Facebook is something that's become really powerful during this time. The way that we text parents, that they are able to contact us by telephone. We use Seesaw as an app as well. So we have parents who are very much in touch with teachers, and that homeschool barrier is very much being broken down again during this time.
Okay,
Can I just come in there? Is that okay? Just from my point of view.
Sorry, we're ignoring you, and I apologise for that.
That's okay. Just from my point of view, I chair the 5 attendance leads from all the local authorities in CSC, and echoing my colleagues in what they're saying. Pupils on the whole are coming back, but there is an issue around elective home education, the reduced timetable, the blended learning package that's been available, and how some of your sort of more difficult, challenging serial miss a day of school a week pupils will come back and adjust to life back in school. So I think, you know, as Lee and Janet have both talked about, the role of the family engagement officer and engaging within your communities has never been more important. You know, that's the messages coming out of Welsh Government, and what this report is trying to do and what we're trying to do is find those schools that are doing it well. And every school is really different, and the way that they're engaging, the people and the context. But we've got to share that good practice and across the piece. And actually, there seems to be a bit of a gap in terms of professional learning and support for the role of the family engagement officers. And you know, we're going to work hard to try and support those positions moving forward.
I would say, just to come in there, John, that's something that we've been working on as well, is developing that job description for a family liaison officer, because it is a very bespoke role. And, you know, we have our learning support assistant job descriptions, you know, old-fashioned level 4, and people can be paid at that level. But actually, the skills that we're demanding from some of these people are way beyond and above that again. So you know, we have worked in Kadakstan to do that. We are going to put it through job evaluation at a higher level again. But it would be nice, actually, perhaps if there was an opportunity for some joint working of schools together on looking at those job descriptions and looking at the role of those people and supporting those people as well in their jobs.
Definitely.
Okay, I've got 2 more members who want to either comment or ask questions, and then perhaps after that, and you know, I think we've this has been a very, very interesting item. It's probably a good job we took it where we have, because I know you know, we had a lot of participants, and perhaps John Welsh, I can come back to you at the very end to sort of make closing comments on this and pick up any points that are made. So perhaps if I can go now to Sandra.
Thank you, Chair. There was just a couple of things that I wanted to ask, really, and sort of whether any of the means of communication that we've had with the parents and pupils over the COVID period, whether that were you found they were good, whether you're going to continue with those. I read within the report that like you said, you know, you're hoping to have that family liaison officer, and whether that will be something that they will be doing to ensure that communication between the school, the pupil and the parents is maintained at that effective level that you seem to have had over the COVID period. I'm sure there are some parents where you haven't had that effective level, but the majority, if you've managed to keep the communication going, whether you're going to carry on with that. And also how with the pupils of who are on free school meals, how we continue to improve the attainment that they actually get when they leave, you know, at the end of their school life as well, because obviously that is below some of their peers that are actually, you know, sort of coming out of schools throughout the UK, basically, and what we do about continuing to improve the results that these pupils get as well. Thank you.
Shall I just say, first of all, yes, we are continuing all of those ways of communicating with parents. You know, it's an opportunity for us to build on that now. So going forward, absolutely, we're building on and making sure that as we hand from one teacher to another teacher, that they let the next teacher know how best to communicate with that parent. One of the things that's happening in Kadakstan and Oakfield as well at the moment is that we're having transition meetings with parents and teachers together. And we're using the technology now to have parent meetings home to school through the day, or if a parent's at work, they're still able to come out for 5 minutes and talk to the class teacher about their child and how best to communicate with them. So that's really important. In terms of attainment of children, as they go, like I said, in Kadakstan, you know, we've got to a point where nearly all of the children are at the expected level leadiness and half are above. However, we know that the examination system is set up so that 30% of the children will fail. That is the case. And inevitably, you know, our children are the ones that are going to be left behind. They don't have such support at home. They don't have the private tutors like Cowbridge and Rada and those schools will have. You know, we have to accept that. If you listen to a podcast, and I'll do an advert there. This is my other advert. I recently recorded a podcast with Sir Alistair MacDonald and the head teacher of Mary Immaculate, Hugh Powell, and we talked in the podcast about exactly this. And he talks about how that system needs to change, so that we can level things out and that all of our children can be leaving school feeling confident that they are useful people who are ambitious and are ethically informed and can go forward and do well in life. So I think that there's something that needs to change in the way that children are assessed.
I agree.
Yeah, for us at Pen Coitra, like I said, a significant amount of our pupils who are eligible for free school meals, but it's about culture, it's about ethos, it's about high expectations. It's about making sure that we're always maximising potential teachers at the top, breaking down the barriers, allowing the children to have experiences, providing them with the support they need, always. And at the end of the day, it's relationships. And that it sounds pretty simple, and we all know it's not simple. It's very, very complex, but it is as basic as that.
Could I just say, so with the idea of, that's the idea of the extended school day. We really struggled with the idea of getting devices and a digital divide and getting that into the community, and it suddenly struck us the environment sometimes in which you get those devices were making the effective use of them difficult, and yet we had an environment where the students out of school hours could be using them with us. A lot of research will tell you in terms of what you need to do is to get these pupils experiences that are the same as they might get in more affluent environments, and we intend to do that. So as well as giving them the opportunity to be having a stable environment in which to carry out academic work outside the school day, which is what some people have at home, the other thing that we're going to be doing is giving them experiences that those other children might have. We're used to, aren't we, dropping people to judo club, waiting outside at 9 o'clock. These opportunities. Lee talked about going to the cinema. These things that these students don't get to do. Now, we're hoping that package, in terms of providing opportunities for those pupils to work in a stable environment with digital devices, outside of school, having experiences like other children have in terms of extracurricular activities, proper potential tutoring activities. If they can't get them at home, we'll see how it goes. But in terms of decreasing the achievement divide, what we are going to do is we are going to try and use our environment and our superb new school and the facilities that we've got to allow them to have those experiences which we're told make a difference to academic achievement within our school, just outside of the school day.
Thank you. That's really good to hear. Thank you for your answers. Obviously, we want everyone to attain the best that they can attain, and hearing what is going to be put in place for pupils and stuff like that is really good to hear as well. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Rhiannon, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you. Having only come out of teaching a couple of years ago, I noticed over the 30 years that I was in the classroom an increased necessity to become a social worker and an advisor to the child as well as the teacher. And I have to, hold my hands up in amazement in the amount of work that staff are doing in order to make sure that children are able to access as much of the curriculum as possible and are able to have a regulated, steady, consistent school experience, because for some of them it will be the only regulated, steady, consistent experience that they have in their lives. And I have seen that, so often and increasingly so, and COVID has simply compounded the problems that already existed. Now, Janet, you were talking about rewriting the descriptions for the kind of person you want as a family liaison officer. And what occurred to me listening to all of this is the necessity of rewriting job descriptions for the kind of people who start working in schools where there are so many children who don't have access to the same kind of opportunities that many other children do, and how they need to be more than just a classroom teacher. You know, I mean, most teachers give up the idea of arriving at 5 to 9 and leaving at 3:30. I mean, when I was teaching, you know, the classroom was the staff room was full at like 7:20 of people stuffing their breakfasts in, putting their lipstick on, and then leaving at 5:30 because they've been running after school knitting clubs or, you know, doing extra homework or whatever with the children. And I think that teaching has become a completely different animal from what it was when my parents went into it at the beginning of the 1960s. And I think that is insufficiently recognised by people outside. I mean, I think presentations like this need to be seen by the whole of the council, because this is what, I mean, education is one of the biggest spenders apart from social services, and obviously you're doing so much joined up work with them as well that you are in fact being a part of the social services department. And I think that this is something that needs to be seen by a much wider audience. I do not think ordinary members of the public recognise how much commitment and time and dedication people are putting into this. You know, I would just like to, you know, congratulate you on everything that you've done. You cannot be paid enough for what you do. And as we all know, teachers are woefully underpaid anyway. And don't tell me about the holidays, because they just don't exist really, do they? So no, my congratulations, and anything we can do to improve things for you, you know, you need to tell us, and we will try and provide it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rhiannon. Right, there's no one else showing that they want to speak, so perhaps I don't know if there's anyone here that, you know, from schools that hasn't spoken yet who would like to make a contribution. No? Okay. John Welch, if I can perhaps come back to you, I don't know if you want to sort of sum up what you've heard and make any other comments.
Well, I think the schools speak for themselves in what a fabulous job you've done, as Rhiannon puts, that the extra mile that you have to go, what we're trying to prepare our teachers for now. I remember saying to my wife 10 years ago, coming home and talking about the kind of things you were doing each day. And she said, well, you're not a social worker. Well, actually, that's kind of your role now. And, you know, going over and above, when you speak to schools, they'd like a dentist on site, they'd like a mental health nurse on site, they'd like a policeman. You know, this whole community school thing is huge. And, you know, schools will be different. I think things like saying in the past, well, we had parents evening, we had 85% attendance, but actually the 15% we really wanted there weren't there. You know, that's the kind of thing that we're getting away from now. Actually, what can we do differently to engage those? And schools, like you've heard from tonight, Ben Coitcher and Kadakstan and Oakfield are doing wonderful jobs in breaking down those barriers and understanding their context. I presented to Central South staff on our expectations of the PDG. It obviously finishes March 2022. As far as we know, the rumours coming out of Welsh governments that it will continue. We don't know in what sort of guise it will be, whether it will be a different name. But we're trying to demonstrate to them how important and how valuable this work is, and taking that money away, hence why we've looked at sustainability, would be catastrophic for, you know, lots of our schools and particularly to our pupils. But also the Child Poverty Action Group recently wrote a report about the fact that there are still 55,000 pupils in Wales living in poverty that don't qualify for free school meals. And actually it's a proxy indicator of poverty, and you know, quite a lot of our working poverty students aren't qualifying. And you know, we're trying to get those messages to Welsh Government. This year will be on 2020 PLASC, which still isn't a reflection on where we are in 2021. So, you know, there are significant challenges for the schools to work with, and you know, it was wonderful to hear the messages, and it's for us trying to get those good points, send them to Welsh Government, and demonstrate the impact that it's having, because you know, we're living in a world without outcomes really at the moment. So yeah, just fantastic presentations, and thanks very much for inviting us.
No, it was a pleasure to listen to everyone. I can see Neil would like to come back in.
Yeah, I think Mr. Redrup maybe wants to speak as well. Am I right? No, that's okay. In that case, I just wanted to remove officers' recommendations with the perhaps an addendum saying something to the effect of our immense thanks and commendation to the schools for the work that they put in over the last 18 months or so, well, during the COVID period, as maybe a third item on the recommendations. Thank you.
I can't see a problem with that at all.
I'll second that, Gordon, if I may.
Yeah, and perhaps, I don't know, I pick up on what was said a little bit earlier, perhaps this is something that should, a presentation of this type should perhaps be looked at by all members of the council. Perhaps we could add that as a recommendation as well and see if the Cabinet and the council generally picks that up.
Yes, that'd be a good idea.
Okay, if everyone that, well, again, thank you to everyone who's attended tonight. It has been fascinating to see to read the work that is done. The only comment I would make is I don't know why the glossary was put at the end of the report. I always think the glossary should be at the front so you read it before you start reading the report itself. But I think on the whole the report was understandable. I don't know whether those who've attended from outside, from the schools and from other organisations want to continue to stay for the meeting, but I'm sure if they want to leave, I think no one will object to that at all. Okay, well, thank you all very much. We'll go back now to agenda item 5, the annual corporate safeguarding report. I should remember who's presenting this one, but
it's Jason Redrup, Chair.
That's why Jason has kept popping up all the time. Yes.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I had to move rooms and the network quality dropped just at the right time for me to start presenting. So apologies. Yeah, obviously, having 2 hours of very inspirational and fantastic presentations is a difficult act to follow, but I will do my best. And I just present to you this year's obviously corporate safeguarding report. Obviously, just to qualify that the report is always for all directorates, but obviously I'm going to focus on the learning and skills element. But as you would appreciate, there are some overlaps with some of the other directorates, such as safer recruitment, and obviously builds on last year's report and shows the ongoing good work that we're doing as a directorate. As I said, it continues to evolve in line with sort of both national and local regional developments. And as a senior officers within the director, the management team obviously consistently monitor all operational safeguarding practice, with there being a standing agenda item on each monthly meeting, looking at our safeguarding training compliance, our with both the director and in schools, along with safer recruitment, allegations against professionals, along with learning from both adult and child practice reviews. So there's a lot going on there. Just taking you through to in a moment. Sorry about this, Chair. My technical issue there. The decided not to work. Okay, hang on a moment. Sorry, can you bear with me 1 second? My report has just crashed, so I'll have to close it and reopen it.
No problem.
Apologies for this. Okay, let's try again. Oh, that's better. Sorry, it's back now.
Okay.
Always the way, isn't it? Hang on a moment. Okay. Okay. Just to say, moving to point 3 there. As of January this year, all schools were provided with a model safeguarding policy, which was compiled by the directorate, which runs in line with the most recent Welsh Government Keep Your Learning Safe Guidance of 2020. Obviously, it was a substantial piece of work, which is now gone off to all schools, and it is an exemplar policy for all to follow. We're anticipating sign up from all schools on that. The annual safeguarding training is delivered across both the Directorate and the schools in line and is quality assured by the Regional Safeguarding Board and colleagues within social services. And employees both within schools and the Directorate are expected to comply with that local training. And we've delivered and now developed and launched on IDEV a level 1 safeguarding package, which went out to all schools in January 21. And just to say, out of the approximately 2,800 staff within schools, and when I last looked this week, 1,700 had completed that training. So I'm really, really pleased with the progress that's taken, because obviously that's combined with some existing training that had taken place in the last academic year. And as of now in September, we're now rolling that IDEV out to all Directorate staff as well, so they get that training. As for the level 2 trainings, which we deliver to our designated safeguarding persons and their deputies in all schools, as well as Directorate staff, is that we're getting good levels of compliance with all that training as well. And I showed you that in the figures. Obviously, it initially says in point 6 there that the school-based DSPs is there's an 82% compliance rate. I can actually tell you now, as of September, that is now 100% compliance. So all our designated safeguarding persons, those people who are in charge of safeguarding within all the schools, are fully compliant in their training. And as for their deputies, out of all the 83 that are trained as DSPs, there's now 75 of those who are compliant. And of those 8, most of them are booked on courses in the autumn. So it's really, really encouraging figures for our levels of compliance around training. And again, the Directorate-based DSP staff, of the 25, they are all in compliance as well. So, people obviously understand the importance of staying up to date and relevant in all elements of safeguarding practice, as it were. As I said, we're working closely with the schools, not only their designated safeguarding person, but also their designated safeguarding governors as well, which I see as a really important critical strategic friend to the DSPs and head teachers in the schools, so they're able to hold them account for ensuring what goes on in the school from a safeguarding perspective. And I know that is clearly outlined in the responsibility of the governors in the both the Keep Your Learners Safe and ESTINs, the self-evaluation reports and the audit tool. And we've just done some very good collaborative work with Cardiff to write some joint designated safeguarding governor training, which is going to be rolled out this autumn, which will further equip our safeguarding governor, that dedicated governor, to be able to understand their role within safeguarding. If I just move on to point 10, obviously, even though, despite, everyone's mentioned COVID, but obviously there's still been significant levels of work going on within directorates, looking at reviewing and renewing both our physical restraint and our time out policies, and also our anti-bullying policies. All those have been put in place, and there's effective link up between the inclusion team, myself, and the health and safety when it comes to physical restraint in schools. And again, when it comes to, in point 11, demonstrating our compliance in relation to licensing children in employment and entertainment, is really encouraging. We had the appointment of the new licensing and data officer, and this has led to real improvements in this area. And currently there's underway an initiative to visit all known sort of urban business centres in Barry, Penarth, Lantwick and Cowbridge, to raise awareness of the rules around child, and as you know, more the re-employment post-COVID. So people understand that the rules and their responsibilities when doing that. And once again, touching on safer recruitment, obviously it runs into the HR side of things, But since 2014, there's been a significant constant increase to reach 100% compliance with safer recruitment, and so schools understand the importance of that. And as recent as now in September, with 201 new appointments, there was a 97.5 compliance rate, which I think is a real credit to all schools to understand the need to comply with that as well. Just to say, we don't just look inwards as safeguarding officer and as other senior officers within the directorate. We engage and represent at Cardiff and the Vale Regional Safeguarding Board, particularly the Children's Board, and on all the relevant subgroups. So we try and strengthen our work in relationship partnership work in looking at such things as child practice reviews, and policies and procedures, etc. And as a safeguarding officer, I also sit on a national, the Wales Safeguarding Education Group. Obviously, look at what's happening on a national and regional level, with emerging hot topics and changes such as modern slavery, human trafficking, etc. And obviously, the commitment there from the Education Directorate around so learning skills around the importance around the VAWDA SV agenda, so the violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence, as well as sitting on the steering groups and regional panels. We also obviously heavily engage in MARIC and those daily discussions, so we're able to put those safety plans in place for not only for the victims of domestic violence, but also their children and their families, so we can have a safer home environment for learners as well. As I said, recognising the value of MARIC and the compliance around Operation Encompass, that national initiative around the early notification from police of families that have experienced domestic violence where there's children present in the home. So there's that early interventions from schools can be put in place. So just in conclusion, I haven't touched on every element of the report, obviously, but just reassurance that there's a continued development of that consistent and robust approach to safeguarding, and it does remain a significant priority for the directorate. And that's it, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Thank you for that. Any questions from members? No. Nobody wants to ask you anything?
No, I think everyone's been too inspired from the previous two speakers to have any questions left for me.
That's probably what it is, yes.
Oh.
Yes. Oh, Neil wants to...
Yeah, no, I don't think it's that at all. I think it's just that your report is actually very comprehensive, and
thank you.
It certainly covered the questions that I'd pre-prepared. So thank you very much for that. No, it is a comprehensive report, and safeguarding them. I think it's crucial to what we're doing as a council. It is about our people and making sure that everyone is safe and developing in the way that they should, and so forth. And yes, you're doing a grand job, and thank you very much. And like I say, you jumped on my question anyway. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Well, I think to be fair, if that it is a comprehensive report, and it's showing that things are going well. And it's always it's more difficult sometimes to ask questions. Things are going well than when they're not. So so thank you for that. Can I just suggest that we note the report and congratulate everyone for the work that's been done. Members happy with that?
Support that.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, agenda item 8. Oh, I think this is Kiva, isn't it, for this? Well, can I say this is obviously the most important report we've got on the agenda for today, because it's obviously the one that's been picked up by the Penarth Daily News. So it's been picked up by that august body. Then really, it must be very important.
That's going to make me nervous.
Councillor Thomas, how can you shake your head like that? Right, sorry, I've interrupted you. Right, you carry on.
No, that's fine. So I'm grateful to the committee for this opportunity, really to raise really awareness. That's the purpose of this, is an awareness raising report to flag up some of the really critical changes that are happening at the moment, both in terms of the Vale of Glamorgan's support and monitoring of elective home education, but also a regional, principality and national level as well. And obviously we've heard this word a few times, but there has been a significant COVID impact in relation to that. So I'm just going to sort of talk through sort of some of the flag up some of the key things in the report, and then obviously will be available for questions afterwards. So the Vale of Glamorgan, like all local authorities, has long-standing obligations to ensure that all children of school age receive a suitable and full-time education at school or otherwise. So this is where, you know, we are a learning and skills directorate. It's not just school education. So legally, parents can elect to home educate. In terms of the numbers for home ed, over the last 3 full years, there's been really significant increases in the number of people who parents who choose to electively home educate their children, and that's mirrored across all of Wales. But just in terms of the Vale of Glamorgan's numbers over those last 3 full years, that the numbers have over doubled. It's worth bearing in mind, which is referenced later on, that the numbers that have increased in the last year, linked potentially to COVID, the Vale's numbers have increased at a significantly lower rate than many other local authorities, but overall, even pre-COVID, elective home education was increasing. So again, moving further on down the report onto page 2 of the report, just to sort of flag up really that parents can choose to home educate, and the local authority has no specific view around that. It's a legal right. However, it's a right that's contingent on making sure that the education provided fits in with the overriding law, which is the education has to be efficient, suitable and full-time. And in relation to sort of wider changes, Welsh Government published draft statutory guidance on elective home education. So the current guidance that's in place for all local authorities in Wales is a non-statutory guidance. So we're advised to follow it, and we do. However, Welsh Government have a proposed fuller and more robust guidance in a statutory form about home education. And one of the things that they're planning to do is take off the E from the elective part and make it home education. So if you're looking for it, you have to look for it in that terminology. There are also sort of linked but slightly separate proposals, which are the database regulations in relation to a database of children missing education, which we call CME. And there is a link, because if elective home education isn't suitable, efficient and full-time, then if in effect that child is deemed to be missing education, just as if they were actually a child that had gone missing from the system. So the local authority then has obligations under Education Act legislation, but also in terms of the rights of the child from European legislation, to make sure that that child has a suitable, efficient education. And sometimes that can mean having to compel the parent to force the child to attend a school, which obviously we would take Welsh guidance and follow that route in terms of support. So in terms of the potential changes that members are advised to sort of consider and be aware of, really, is the changes that are upcoming around CME, the list of database for regulations around that. And that part of the aim of that also will be to close some of the gaps within home education and CME, which exist currently in relation to children who go to independent private schools and children who've never been on roll at a school and who therefore might not be known to the local authority. So there are big changes afoot in relation to that. They've been put on hold in recent months because of COVID, but they're likely to progress in the near future. And also really to raise awareness about the fact that there's a growing number of electively home educated learners, but also a growing complexity of their needs, which can include additional learning needs, but also a really fundamental change in the way that local authorities support electively home educated children, which is demonstrated by the fact that now in the last year, for the first time ever, Welsh Government have issued a grant to local authorities in 2 parts. The first part being to support existing obligations, and that can be used to contribute towards officers to support home ed, but also a per pupil, or per learner rather, amount, a nominal amount that the local authority are encouraged to spend to support electively home educated learners. And that really is a sort of a change of focus in terms of the expectation of local authorities, because obviously if it's taxpayer money. We want to make sure that that money is distributed fairly, and also that we create an offer which is meaningful and combines with the rights of the child to have a good education, the rights of the parent to choose the type of education, but also in line with other agendas such as ensuring that those children don't become NEET, not in employment, educational training, and trying to make a really meaningful and supportive offer that balances all those interests which can sometimes appear quite conflicting. So in terms of going further down, a little bit further down the report, looking down now to page 4, at my 1.5, really up until March 2020, the local authorities functions lay for home education lay in a different part of the directorate under the ALN wing of the directorate, and that's now moved to the school improvement and inclusion part of the team, and sits within my inclusion team. And in terms of the way that we've changed things, we've increased capacity for electively home educated support in terms of local authority officers, and we've done that even before the Welsh Government grant, because we were recognising that the increase in numbers and the increase in complexity of support needs for those home educated learners, and also recognising that there was a growing expectation by Welsh Government of how often and how robustly the home educated legal requirement and threshold was monitored. So we've used that additional capacity to really change some of the systems that we have in place over the last year or so. And again, of course, that was through COVID. So we've used some of the same strategies that you've heard schools talking about by doing virtual visits, Zoom, online home visits, all sorts of things, so that we can try and keep the momentum up in terms of the electively home educated supported learners. In terms of the changes within the inclusion team as well, we've changed some of the structure of that so that the provision is available all year round, because electively home educated children don't have to stick to term times, so therefore it makes sense for us to have a year-round provision on longer term contracts. And also lots of training within the inclusion team, but also the wider officers of the directorate, and also rolling out to schools in terms of elective home education and when and how children can come off roll, what support schools would be encouraged and asked to make sure that they'd offered before a child became off roll, to make sure that it's a positive choice, and also to ensure that there's no off-rolling for less positive reasons by schools, and also to ensure that those children don't go off our radar and become children missing education, so that the processes are all adhered to as we go through. So, and again, a really big focus in terms of what we're doing around a child-focused approach. So that's very difficult for officers to achieve in all local authorities, because elective home education, I suppose the phrase apples and pears comes up, because electively home educated suitable education can mean many different things. So we have to rely on case law, and we have to rely on the learner voice. We have to rely on what the parent tells us is being delivered in terms of education. And we have to look to all those things to try and make a measure of whether that education is suitable, efficient or full time. And so we've done a lot of work around trying to make sure that that's a fair and transparent way of assessing that education as best we can. In terms of the training, as I've said, we've rolled out a lot of training, both internally and externally to all schools. And again, if a child becomes electively home educated, we want to make sure that the schools tell us within the legal 10 days, so that we can keep track of them and that they don't then subsequently become children missing education. So there's a safeguarding link in relation to that. In terms of raising awareness around some of the sort of the impact, the so what in relation to that, I just flag up that the number of learners that we visited, either in face-to-face visits or virtual visits over the last 12 months is a new measure in the last couple of years. And we're able to show significant increase in the number of home visits despite COVID. So the numbers had gone up by 38% on the year before. So that might not sound a huge achievement, but in real terms, in terms of the numbers that we've got and the cultural changes that have needed to be in place for that, that's a significant achievement, particularly during the pandemic. And we also offered a support to families that are electively home educated, who might otherwise have been quite reluctant to engage with the local authority during the pandemic, and to link into other services as well, to ensure that those home educated learners although not directly affected by COVID and by the school closures, weren't impacted as children with human rights and needs in terms of the mental health impact of the isolation, etc., of lockdown, because lots of their groups were also closed down at that time. So, and one of the other things that's a significant achievement, which is a cross-directorate and cross team education in terms of the schools as well, is that although many local authorities saw a very significant rise in the number of children becoming home educated during COVID because of fears about being penalised or pushed into attending early on or too early as they perceived it when there was a higher risk, our schools worked very well with families and with the inclusion team to really support and offer a phased returned intake so that there wasn't a greater than absolutely necessary rise in elective home education. And a lot of local authorities are now seeing many of those children seeking to come back to school or having to deal with really, really significant numbers of home ed. In terms of the, so as I say, in terms of the rise, our rise is significant over the last 18 months, but is lower than in many local authorities, and we still have a low percentage per thousand compared to other local authorities. In April 2020, as I said, was the first time that we had the local authority grant for home ed, and we've used up until then, no local authority would give financial support to parents for the delivery of elective home education in any way, really. And so, and that's really one of the primary requirements of a parent when they write a deregistration letter, is to say that they take full responsibility for their child's education. So it's a very significant change of focus and approach, and in line with, as I said, the European Convention on Human Rights and the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So in line with that, we've tried to create a fair and transparent basis for allocating the resources, and we made sure that we made that offer open to all the home educated learners we had or were aware of, and that included accessing tuition to support access for GCSEs. It was going to be exams, but of course then it became the assessed grades. So we supported in the medium of English and Welsh language to enable home educated learners to get GCSEs. We also reimbursed costs of exam providers if parents had already committed to those elsewhere. And we've also provided one-day courses in a range of topics such as health and safety, first aid, food hygiene, and also been able to loan out IT equipment to learners where we are satisfied that the suitability threshold is met in terms of the provision, or that by lending the computer we will enable that threshold to be met. So again, these are quite significant things, and they're significant in terms of the increase of dialogue between these families as well. Just going down, just to check a couple of things. So in terms of the second part of the grant has helped us to recruit additional staff. So previously the role was carried out part-time by a learning support assistant, and under the new grant we've allocated that to teachers. So that will enable us to have a better basis for assessing the suitability of the education in those borderline cases, to enable better support using the grant money, and to get greater sort of stakeholder input in terms of the things that stakeholders want, such as access to exams, etc. And to be able to provide support for learners who want to be home educated and the parents want that, but where they might need a little bit of additional help. And that includes a wide range of families from a wide range of backgrounds. We're also offering support, for example, to children who are from Gypsy traveller communities who are electively home educated, to ensure that they also meet the threshold and are able to do so. And then in cases where the home education provision isn't considered to be suitable, and we've gone through all the steps required by Welsh Government guidance, and we've tried to get the education to the level required, if that's not then possible within a reasonable time frame, then we also need to issue a process of a school attendance order to compel children back to school. So obviously we try to work in a positive way with the learner and to work with the parent, but ultimately there is that sanction, and that's an obligation that we have to do that. So again, that grant money will help us to do that, because as you can imagine, that's not often a straightforward process and needs to be done fairly and transparently and involve schools and a whole range of processes, and as well as the courts. So in terms of just summarising the changes that are going ahead, it's very likely that home education will continue to increase regardless of COVID. And there are lots of reasons for that in terms of the possibility of it, awareness of it, critical mass theory, all those sorts of things, and the wide range, particularly now, of online provision that parents can access, as well as the immediate impact of COVID and people having been out of education for some time. And also important to flag as well that the obligations of the local authority are likely to increase and become more complicated in terms of issuing school attendance orders in the small percentage of cases where learners are not receiving suitable education, despite support from us. And also just to flag that the ALNET Act, the Additional Learning Needs and Tribunal Act, is likely to have a significant impact on the local authority's support for learners who are home ed but also have additional learning needs. We're still waiting for some clarification from Welsh Government around that, but I think it's likely that there will be more role for the local authority to carry out with those learners there. And also in relation to COVID, that sort of story is certainly not over yet in relation to learners that are parents and families are reluctant for the learners to go back to school full time. So there are a number of learners who are still concerned about the impact of COVID and impact of going back to school. And it's a very difficult balancing act in relation to encouraging attendance to school and also not wanting to push people who are less than keen to become home ed into home ed just to avoid fines and penalties. So and also there is a real significance for people that become home ed. If they become home ed but then later want to come back to school, they might not go back to their school of their choice due to school admissions regulations and the number of places in each school. So lots of potential impacts around that are making our work more challenging in relation to what we do. But in terms of the restructure and the way that we're spending the money, I think we're confident that we're as best placed as possible to do so. The role of the local authority really is to enable the raising of overall standards and achievement for all learners, whether on roll or school or not. So really a huge part of the work we do is the inclusion aspect, to make sure that children receive that suitable education, whether it's at school or not, and really to work with families who are electively home educated, both in terms of the rights of the child and the rights of the parent to make that decision. And to respect that right as well. I think that's really fundamental, and to really take a very individual approach to that, regardless of where the child lives or what their background is. We've also tried very hard, a significant part of the work we've done in the response to COVID in relation to rising home ed numbers, and also to children who have been reluctant to engage in school, who have become home ed for a short period and now want to go back into school, is that the local authority responded to that. And linked back again to one of the presentations earlier about outsourcing. We decided not to outsource in relation to this, but to have our own in-house team. So we created a new team called the OR team, which is a short for Attainment, Wellbeing and Engagement. And that team, in terms of their job descriptions, deliberately had a very flexible job description, a very wide job description, so that we can use them in terms of responding to the need as and when it changes. So those teams have supported electively home educated learners, they've supported them going back to school, they've supported them whilst they're home ed, and they've got that flexibility and that skill set that utilises things like the trauma-informed schools approach, the ACE approach, and also has a really good understanding of the rights of parents around home education as well. So I think, again, that's something that we would like committee to note in terms of value for money and spend and reactive spending to meet all our commitments, even in a very changing world. Just going to scroll down, just check, I think. Coming in. So again, as I say, we've recruited additional staff through the OR team and through the Welsh Government grant. So we've really bolstered our capacity, and also in terms of the restructure generally around the team, we have raised awareness of elective home education, so that it's not dealt with in a very siloed capacity, so that everybody within the inclusion team is able to give advice around home education and around how and when it is appropriate and legal and how and when it's not, and how so that parents are better placed and schools are better placed to advise families if home education is becoming a consideration, so that we can ensure that if it does become a choice by parent, that it's a positive choice and that it's a choice that meets the needs of the child as well. And that's the report as far as I'm concerned. So if there are any questions.
Well, thank you for that, because I think this is something I've always sort of been interested in, the whole issue of home education. And I think, to be fair, that report and what you said tonight has really dealt with so many issues I've sort of thought about in the past, and that was very, very helpful. But it's interesting, you know, as you know, even though the numbers have gone up, that we're still there at the bottom as far as the number, as you know, in looking at as percentages, etc., in children who have this this type of education. So, well, thank you. It's very, very interesting report. Neil, you want to comment or ask a question?
I comment more than anything. I did hang back to see if anybody else put their hand up first, but nobody did. But again, I think it reflects the comprehensive nature of the report that most people's questions have already been answered, and thank you for that, Kiva. In terms of home education, the fact that it's gone up less here than it has in other parts of the country and across England is perhaps a reflection of the quality of our schools, and that maybe less people are less willing to, or more unwilling to disengage with the schools. I think I've got too many double negatives in there. Is there any survey that's been done on the people, on the families that have chosen to home educate, on reasoning and why, and whether there's a trend, whether there's any sort of pattern to it? Basically, that's the question I've got to ask. I'm just trying to understand why anybody is choosing to do this. Thank you.
Yeah, so whenever a family a child or a learner becomes home educated, we seek to do a home visit. We seek to ask those opinions. We have a sort of a range of options for them to give. Ultimately, it's a parental choice, but we break that parental choice down into different reasons. And so we have been doing that for a while now, and most local authorities have been doing that for a while now. What we've also done in response to COVID was that we have, through the school head teacher meetings, we've made very clear to head teachers that we've instigated a form that we ask head teachers to complete, which sets out what conversations they've had with the family before they take them off roll, to make sure that there aren't any reasons that affect school improvement or safeguarding or concerns around bullying or any of the possible reasons why a child might want to come off roll, not just in relation to COVID. So that's something that we put in place around 12 months ago. Or maybe more longer now, time blurs, about 18 months ago probably. So we use that, and then we use that data as well to make comparisons and to present that to head teachers when we have concerns, if there is a reason, if there's an issue. So sometimes parents will give a reason, for example, that they're unhappy about a particular provision or something, and we will explore that with schools, because although we don't, it's a legal right to home educate if it's a positive choice, we're always keen to encourage children back into school if it's something that can be resolved. So we work very hard to do that, and we do that on a strategic level through our wellbeing improvement matrix each term, and we do the number crunching, for want of a better word, in terms of that, so that there's a fair comparison between schools, so that we're not, for example, praising a school that has great attendance and no exclusions, but actually, when we look, has very high numbers of children becoming into home education, because we see that as an indicator as well of something that we want to check, and we want to check that schools have offered the whole, as we call it, graduated response in terms of pastoral support, anxiety provision, mental health provision, all those sorts of things. So we have a system in place for doing that, which gets better, every month, I hope. And that links into Estin's framework for an advice and guidance as well. So there is an Estin paper on that called deregistration practices, which flags up good practice for schools. So we always share that back in as well in relation to that. Chair on mute.
I was muted. Sorry, apologies. Yes, right. I'll hand over to you now, Morwen.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come in on the back of all of this, really. Kiva's been in post about 18 months, which you may not realise, and has really raised the profile of EHE across the Directorate and with schools as well, and a huge amount of training, which she's already referred to. Councillor Thomas, you said about the quality of our schools, which may be one of the factors as to why we haven't got that increase. And I think you're right, to a large degree. But also, I think it's the collaboration between Kiva and her team and schools and parents as well, and the real in-depth explanations of the impact of EHE. And, you know, some parents may have chosen that because of COVID, they want to home educate their own children, but they now understand there's no automatic right to go back to the school from where they've come. And our schools are so full, it causes a bit of a bottleneck further down the line. And I think our teams and within the Directorate, we're working so closely together that real collaboration between us all and the schools, that's been part of the contribution as well, I believe, to the lower increase than we've seen in other local authorities. And interestingly, until we had the data from other local authorities, we were quite alarmed, you know, and I think every few weeks I would email Kiva, you know, what are we looking at now? It's like, oh, another few, you know, and we were quite concerned. But actually, compared to others, we have done remarkably well, I think. And I think that a lot of it is our own work with those schools together. And, you know, it's down to Kiva's strategic way in which she's brought it all together.
Okay, thank you. Well, yeah, the numbers are very, very low, aren't they? You know, there's no, you know, even when you look at the increase, the actual, you know, the actual percentage is, well, I don't know, it'd be very small, very, very small percentage, almost difficult to work out, actually. So, okay, well, thank you again to Kiva for that report and that presentation, and I think it really has answered a lot of thoughts that I had about the whole issue of home education. So thank you for that. So can I suggest that members welcome the report and the information contained in it, and again thank everyone for the hard work they've put in. Yep,
welcome the report.
For that? Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. Right, agenda item, where are we? Agenda item 8, and I think that's Martine.
Hello, can you hear me all right, Chair?
I can, and I assume everyone else can as well.
Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. Okay, well, I'm Martine Coles, and I'm the Vulnerable Groups Manager for the Vale of Glamorgan, and this evening I would like to give you an update on the Syrian resettlement programme from an education perspective in the Vale of Glamorgan. So, like what we've said before, we as a local authority ensure that the children of school age have a suitable matched full-time education provision, including those on the Syrian resettlement programme. And the Minority Ethnic Achievement Gypsy Roma Traveller Grant continues to provide the funding to give the specialist support and resources we need to support these learners. Now, the Vulnerable Groups team, has improved the support for learners as part of the programme over the last 12 months. And what we've done, we've applied for additional funding from the Home Office because we identified the need in some of the children needing that extra bit of support that we didn't have the capacity to do as a team. So what I wanted to do today was to give the committee just an oversight and to celebrate the achievements of the children and their families. So the background of the programme, it's part of the Vulnerable Persons and Vulnerable Children's Resettlement Programme operated by the Home Office. And this scheme was launched in 2014 and has helped those in greatest need, including people needing urgent medical treatment, survivors of violence and torture, and women and children at risk. And in 2017, the Home Office took the decision to extend the scope of this scheme to include refugees who have fled the conflict in Syria, but not necessarily be Syrian nationals. Now, this scheme aims to provide refuge for vulnerable refugees by offering a safe, direct and legal route to the UK. Now, this Syrian resettlement programme is part of the Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Programme, but for the purposes of this evening, I am going to just refer to it as a programme. So when the Vale became part of this programme in 2016, since then we've welcomed 15 families in total, and there are 10 schools as part of the programme. And today we have 34 learners in total, 31 are from the local authority programme and 3 are from a community sponsorship group, and 28 were school age and 6 are post 16 or in college and working. And over the next 10 days, we're expecting 3 more learners as part of another community sponsorship programme, which will add another 2 more schools. So one of the things I wanted to bring to the attention was that when we have the serial reassessment programme, we work really closely with housing to make sure that where the families are housed and accommodated, we've got school places. And when we have the community sponsorship groups, because they are an independent group, we need to make sure we work really hard with our admissions team, because sometimes homes are identified and there may not necessarily be school places for those children. Now, as a vulnerable groups team, we collaborate with local authority officers, including the Syrian Reassessment Programme coordinator who sits in housing, schools and families, and as I said, the community groups, to make sure that the children can access the curriculum. Now, I've already said the admissions team are very key to making sure that the children don't have to wait long before they get into a school. And then we step in to provide the support when the children and the families arrive with their new schools, because sometimes it's really hard for the children to come from camp to a new school with new friends. So to facilitate this, the school staff and the team, we work really hard on not just the academic progress of the children, their social emotional needs, because all of the children are different. Even in one family, they will present as different needs. So the team supports the schools with the greatest level of complex children, apply for Home Office funding, and the 2 bids we've completed with schools, both bids have been successful. Now, the LSAs that we fund through the Home Office and our own local authority LSAs, we do a really big piece of work with homeschool liaison, because what we've found is that homeschool liaison is vital for pupils' progress. I know we've talked about it in the earlier presentations from the schools, but what we've found, especially in the past 18 months, how creative we've had to be to make sure we provide those homeschool links and provide that targeted support. Because one of the things that came up in terms of schools supplying devices for children, especially on the resettlement programme, some of our families didn't have Wi-Fi. So that was something we had to work with. And I don't know if Trevor's still on the call, but Trevor helped us out with dongles, because then we had to train the adults with how to use the technology. And that was an interesting part of our team's work, using WhatsApp, all types of video technology to make sure we could communicate with the parents so the children could access the online learning. And one of the things, we were really lucky, and we didn't plan it, but in January 2020, the team trialled Giglet, which is an online literacy tool. And we wanted to trial it because it was multilingual, and we thought it's inclusive and it's not badged as an EAL literacy tool, it's badged as a literacy tool that happens to have books that the children are doing in class in different languages. So we had that in place in January with a couple of schools, but then obviously March hit, so we could develop that tool with families. And what the families have said in lockdown, this online digital resource, they felt even more included in the learning, because the texts that the children were doing at home, the families could access them in Arabic. And so apart from being bilingual, the resources that we had with Giglet, this online resource, they talked about children moving from country to a country of safety and sanctuary. And they were themes that the children and the families really identified. And obviously the books had children of different cultures. So when we were talking to the children and their families about developing literacy, we were doing it with literature that was inclusive to them, where they were in there, they were represented. So when I talked about the team using things like WhatsApp and FaceTime for the literacy resources, so there was lots of garden learning where we were trying to do literacy interventions and, for example, spelling catch up in children's gardens, because we wanted to make sure the children, especially for this resettlement programme, retained their level of learning, because we'd worked so hard with the schools for those children to develop their level of English language acquisition. We didn't want to lose ground, so that meant the team had to work really hard in a very targeted way to make sure the children reached their potential. So the children, when they went back, all of them made progress. They either made progress in their English language and or their literacy, and that, I think, is a massive achievement to do throughout a lockdown, when lots of the families were really nervous about the children either going to the hub, because we had to make sure that the misconceptions about certain ethnic groups being more susceptible, and therefore there was lots of barriers to say that, yes, as an ethnic group, you are more susceptible, but this is what we do to keep you safe in school and your children safe in school. So all of that targeted support, it was about the academic. And in the report, we talk about the GCSE grades that the children got. But I think what's important is that the children made progress, and we made sure that those families felt involved in their learning, because we have a finite amount of resources and we need the parents to be present in their learning for the children. So it was a good way to support the adults' level of language acquisition at the same time as the children. And what we've found that is a struggle with some of our schools is that additional funding for the Home Office is only really accessible in year 1, and from year 2 onwards we have to go through a different type of funding structure, because in year 1 we get some money as local authority we can give to schools, but from year 2 onwards, when we find that the learning challenges come to light, because there is a honeymoon period with many of our children, and then once the honeymoon period finishes, then we have to make sure that we work with the Home Office for the children and their parents to access that specialist social emotional support. Because what we've worked with the schools on, the trauma-informed approach, is okay at the start, but as time goes on, especially when puberty hits in with our secondary schools, with our young people, they really struggle. They really struggle with their social emotional needs. So we have to make sure that we are proactive. And if we know that's happened in the past, we have to make sure that we work with the Home Office to make sure there's a national solution rather than just a scattergun approach. So we think going forward, we need to make sure we use our parents as a resource to build capacity for meaningful integration, because the families have got lots of skills that are transferable. And so what the schools have offered and the parents are wanting to take part in, they want to volunteer in the schools. And one of the barriers that I've identified in the report is the DBS, but we're working with the Home Office to make sure that we can overcome that, because if you've got parents whose level of English is developing and they want to be part of the school community, then we need to support them with that. Now, with Welsh Government, they're unable to provide certainty over the future funding of the grant that supports these families as a local authority, but it's an annual concern, and this funding covers the cost of the staff salaries. And as you can see in the report, we received the award in June 2021. So a future consideration as a local authority is that the National and Welsh Government have committed to the UK Global Resettlement Programme, which will supersede the Syrian Resettlement Programme, but there'll be a separate scheme in light for what's happened in Afghanistan. That will be a separate programme for the families from Afghanistan, which is something that as a team we will support the schools and the children and their families, because that's what we will do and we do it well. And I wanted to finish my report on a real positive, because family engagement is key for us. And one of the things that happened just the week before last, we were trying to get families in our secondary schools in St Cyrus to be more engaged with the children's learning, because they were engaged in lockdown with online learning, but we didn't want to lose momentum. So we asked the parents to work with the school for the school to apply to be a school of sanctuary. And we had the news that the school achieved the award, and it's the first award in the Vale of Morgan Council. But what the panel, an independent panel across the UK, said was that the voice of the parents and the child that were part of the Syrian Resettlement Programme was really strong and really articulate. So going forward, what I would like, and especially after listening to the schools, I think going forward, I'd really like to share testimonials from the young people and their families, because they've come such a long way. And to be honest with you, they are our superheroes. The young people and their parents, how they really want to engage and achieve is something we're proud of when we're working with them. So all of those garden and creative type learning opportunities we did over lockdown is worth it as far as we're concerned as a team.
You're muted, Chair.
Gordon, you're on mute.
I've unmuted myself now, so again, thank you. I'll say again, thank you for that. Is there any questions from members? Oh, Councillor Burnett.
It was only just to make a quick comment that when a report is presented in such a sort of consummately professional way, it all makes it sound so easy, and the different the different areas, different issues that Martine and the team have to juggle to get these sorts of outcomes are absolutely phenomenal. I was hugely fortunate years ago to meet up with some of the families in Barry Library, where they were doing some courses, and I'm actually going back to meet some of those families again on Monday with the minister, and he's actually going to be meeting them, and I think I'm delighted that we have said that we are very delighted to welcome additional families and families from Afghanistan, and I've got absolutely no hesitation in saying that Martine and the team will pull off such similar amazing feats in the future. So a big thank you to the team from me, and I think from the way people are nodding from everybody else as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
But sorry, Chair, can I just say?
Yes, by all means.
I just wanted to add that the reason why we can be successful with this programme is the children. The children and their families are phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. When they're on their first day of school, when they're there with their uniform, bright-eyed and petrified, and then the teachers are amazing. All of our schools go above and beyond to make sure those children are the school's children. They're not the EMAS team's children, and they're not somebody different. They are part of the school community. And I'm very proud of the fact that in the Vale, that when I go to the All Wales meetings and I hear that other authorities sometimes have challenges, I'm really proud that in the Vale, the schools welcome the children and they teach the children. And obviously wellbeing is part of it, but they are ambitious for these children that we have and that we are privileged to have in our local authority. Sorry, I will stop ranting.
Congratulations.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So can members then note the report and again offer thanks for everything, all the hard work that's carried out?
Yes, definitely.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you all very much. And we come last but not least to agenda item 9, the annual delivery plan monitoring report for Q1 performance.
That will be me, Chair, if that's okay.
That is you, okay, yes.
Yeah, and you say last but not least, and I'm afraid that after the really interesting reports we've had this evening, this probably is the least of them all. Paula can't be here, as you're aware, and neither can Tom Bowring, which is why I've got it. So what I've got here is this is included in Appendix 2 of the pack. And I'm going to be brief, and then if you have any questions, myself, David or Trevor, we will do our best to answer them. But it's just going to be a high-level summary of what you've already got. So this is the report which shows our progress from Q1 towards our annual delivery plan, which you will have seen. And you know that slide that you have in front of you is positive. You know, the overall RAG rate, as you can see, is green. And we've done really well. I think, you know, it has been a very challenging year, as you all know, and what we have achieved as a directorate, we are very proud of, resulted in that green. So if I just look through what we have achieved, and then maybe just draw your attention to and highlight a couple of aspects, you know, for objective 1, working with and for our communities, you know, one of the big things has been during all this about the digital exclusion of children. And I know Trevor and his team have worked incredibly hard to make sure that children have got access to IT equipment so that they can learn effectively at home. I'm not going to go through them all because you will have read it, I know. From Objective 2, we've talked about the catch-up in learning, and we've worked very, very closely with our schools and supported them where we can to make sure that our young people can catch up on that learning lost. In Objective 3, the vulnerable children, the work that David and I have done working with children's services, with the vulnerable children tactical group, has been very good. It's actually helped relationships and collaboration between the two directorates. It's been really good, and we've done some superb activities, and you'll have been aware of the Summer of Fun programme that we've had, and a lot of that was developed across the two directorates. Then Objective 4, when you look at things like that, you know, the decarbonisation is fantastic, and I know that, you know, we have got schools that will be carbon neutral as and when they are built. Gareth, if you could move on, please. So within the performance status you've got there, we had only 3 measures that we RAG rated as red. And those 3 measures, all of them were as a result of COVID. One of them was about the Inspire to Achieve, and the second one, Inspire to Work. And that was about the number of young people engaging in those 2 programmes, and it was below target. But I think you would understand that as a result of COVID, that is, you know, pretty much, I think that's perfectly acceptable. It sits within my service area. Our targets are highly challenging, very, very aspirational, which is the way that we want it, but we didn't achieve them, but it was COVID related. And the third aspect was, unsurprisingly, the number of visitors to libraries during Q1, which again, you won't be surprised with that. Gareth, if you could move on, please. So what do we need to improve? If we're looking at those aspects, and I think that we are very honest as a directorate and reflective in where we are and what we could do better. Back to the digital exclusion in Objective 1, you know, we acknowledge that there still are aspects that could be better. There are still children who may not be accessing digital technology in the way that we'd like. So that is something that we're still working towards, despite the huge progress that we have made. If you look at Objective 2, young people engaging with learning, again, is not quite where we want to be. And we've also got a number of children not in education and employment or training. We are doing particularly well with that, but still we want to be better. So it is that constant strive to be the best we possibly can be. Objective 3, with things like that, we've got, you know, again, the work of the young people's wellbeing is a big priority for us, and the travel plans will support that as well, of it, making sure that our young people, including those with disabilities, you know, can become independent and have a better wellbeing as a result of it. And then looking at Objective 4, the green infrastructure strategy is key, and we are very, very keen on making our schools as eco-friendly and working towards that decarbonisation as much as we possibly can. Gareth, if you don't mind moving on, please. So within the Appendix 2, you have then got our coronavirus recovery update. And again, I'm not going to go through the whole thing and insult your intelligence, but just to pick out a few different aspects of it. We have got our ESF programs, which I've already referenced, the Inspire to Achieve, Aspire to Work. They are doing extremely well. We want to be better, but it's going very well. And our young people are engaging positively. Our youth service does a superb job at making sure that they are engaged as far as possible. And our collaboration with Careers Wales has definitely improved actually during the lockdown. You know, that is something that I would say 2 years ago was not great, but we have had very good meetings with them, and it is now clearly impacting. So it's a very positive working relationship. And you can see on there as well the school-based counselling, which, as you can imagine, during this period has been so vital to our young people. And we've had additional capacity from Bernardo's Cymru, which is definitely supporting our children particularly well. And, you know, we've now got this with our primary age children as well. as you can imagine, we are seeing quite high levels of anxieties. If you could go to the second slide, please, Gareth. Thank you. Sorry, I've just lost my way on the slides. Okay, so what we've got here is some of the additional things that we've done. Some of the trauma, and you'll have heard David talking before about the trauma-informed schools training. This is across all our schools. It is definitely having an impact. You know, David did a huge amount of research before introducing it across the Vale, and it is now the strategy that we all use, that all schools understand, and it is one that I think, well, David particularly will be extremely proud of, but we all are as a directorate working with our schools to support our young people the best we possibly can. The trauma and mental health informed schools training, which is what I've just referenced, but that has gone on wider, including other aspects of it, which you'll see within that as well. You know, the workshops, the first aid training, they're all coming out as a result of this strategy from David. And also there's further resources that have been highlighted there too, that have now been bought in. Some of it's through grant funding that we've had through Welsh Government for schools to help them support those young people as they go as they go back into school. If we go to the final slide then, please, Gareth. So within this, Kiva, or as you mentioned, the Attainment, Wellbeing and Engagement team, that was new as a result of the pandemic. It was something that we could see was a gap in supporting our young people. And you know, what started off with one teacher is now expanded, and it's one teacher and 3 LSAs. We're currently out to advert for a Welsh speaking LSA, which isn't actually very easy. So, you know, if we don't, the advert is currently out. If we can't appoint or recruit there, we will be looking to see if we can second from one of our Welsh medium schools. But that is certainly responding to COVID. And it's been, I think, a proactive response as a local authority, and not something I'm aware of other local authorities doing, actually. Our EOTUS is still there, it's still well used, and our contracts have been renewed to make sure that children have full access to a wide curriculum. And it was interesting from the presentation that you'll have heard from Lee Humphreys in Pencoitra, what they are doing, and you know, he did acknowledge the amount of support that they've had from us as a local authority, both people support and financial support. But what they have done in Pencoitra is use some of the EOTUS programs and providers that we as a local authority use, and they are now delivering those at school themselves. And they have really worked and researched a curriculum offer that meets the needs of their young people. Now, you'll have heard about the level of deprivation that they have at the school and the level of challenge. And actually, in the summer term, they had fewer exclusions than any of the other secondary schools across the Vale, which is quite surprising, but is definitely as a result of them meeting the needs of their young people. So you can see, you know, it's a whistle-stop tour that I think that you will have read the report. There's a lot going on. We're particularly proud of the work we are doing as a directorate. Our relationships with our schools are very good, which actually improved, I would say, weirdly, as a result of coronavirus. And things are going well. That's not to say that things couldn't be better. We are very open to improving. We're open to the challenge, and we always want to do better, because ultimately what we want is what we all want, which is to do the best we possibly can for all the children and young people in the Vale. That is it for me. Is there any questions anybody would like to ask?
I don't think so, by the look of it. Okay, well, thank you again for that. To bring the meeting, I think, to a conclusion, unless I can find anything else. But I think, yeah, no, I think it's good to see what's been happening, and I think you know, as we always say, there are difficult times, but you know, I think we're doing very well. So if somebody'd like to move recommendations,
I'll move the recommendations.
Okay.
I'd like to second them. It's Rhiannon.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for that, and thank you all for your attendance. I think we've had a very interesting meeting tonight, some fantastic presentations, and it's really great to be hearing exactly what's going on in the schools, which is really what we should be interested about in I think at this meeting. So until the next meeting, thank you all for your attendance, and I hope you can all manage now to have something to eat if you haven't done so already.
My wife's cooking now.
Oh, we'll be round shortly.
Gammon, egg and chips.
Excellent.
Well, I wish I could say the same thing that my wife was cooking, but